Silver City, Market Square. You can hear merchants shouting to buy a bleaching potion. Someone offers a passing gentleman a cigar. Ladies and gentlemen, rich and poor of different classes, scurry around the main square of the city. A cart is driving and shouts are heard to give way. The cart is rushing fast. People make way and whisper to each other. They are transporting someone, apparently a new prisoner. There are so many guards accompanying him. In the cage of the cart, pointed ears and golden pupils are visible, so it must be a werewolf, someone in the crowd suggests, wanting the creature to die. Apparently it killed a lot of people. The Silver City is famous for its huge prison called the Prison of the Rose, on which is engraved a magic spell that seals magic, and Lord Aiden Garrett himself is the warden. There is no chance of escape, but not everyone wants to believe it, so someone's hand breaks through the stone floor. And now the Princess of the Blood is free, happy that she has outwitted the warden Aiden himself, who can compete with her. The creature takes deep breaths. This is the taste of freedom. Just a few more steps and she will be free like a bird. The bloodsucker thought, I had to dig for 2 years. They didn't even strengthen it with silver. It was painful, of course, but it was worth it. The vampire stood under the full moon. Bats flew by. Oh, the moon, oh, the air. The moment of bliss was interrupted by a male voice calling her a complete fool and giving her a minute to return to the cell. A man in a high top hat appeared from the darkness and noticed that Madame Vampire had 98 years of imprisonment. But apparently, everything was going to the point that the sentence would be over. When she asked how he knew what she had hidden, he replied that vampires don't need to go to the toilet, and she hung out there twice a day. She sank with such openness and clarified why he didn't stop her right away. He said that he just wanted to take her by surprise. Then, Vampiriella stated that having caught her 2 years ago by her mistake, she was looking for a way out and now only one of them would die. And then they put the barrel of a gun to her head from behind. A cute girl with ponytails named Vanessa, who served time for murder, calmly said that Aiden ordered her to be caught. The senior witch Dolly came out next and languidly noticed that the escaped prisoner had been digging for a very long time. She almost went crazy from boredom. Growling angrily, the driven bloodsucker addressed them with the words that they were the most powerful witches on the continent. Accompanied by the priests of death, the smiling necromancer Arson appeared with a question whether the vampire's ashes can be kept for themselves. The vampires screamed why they were serving a human. The witches remained silent, pretending that they had not heard the question, while the captured captive growled like a hunted animal. The man in the top hat answered for them that there was a business agreement between them. He improved their detention in prison, and they help in capturing the escapees. Then the vampire showed with all her appearance that, unlike her worthless comrades, she had pride, so she was not going to return to the cell. Then the man seriously said that then she would be gagged with garlic, tied to a cross, and taken out into the sun. The picture was not pleasant for the vampire. She saw herself in this position and became quiet. After only a second, she coquettishly babbled, "Why is he doing this to her? She just went out to admire the moon." The warden ordered her to return through the same hole from which she came out, or he would pour holy water on her. The overseer was Aiden Garrett, famous throughout the continent for his strength, a sharpshooter and swordsman. His name alone makes the evil spirits tremble. And then at one moment he died, and our hero was called from his world into his body without having anything of his skills and experience. The only experience was the skill of a prison guard, but all the most vicious women of the continent gathered in this prison. Demons sucking the soul to the last drop of blood and dreaming of doing this to Aiden. Zombies that killed without any pity or reason. Draconids, who pushed a person to the most vicious desires and took away the body. And here is another variety. A succubus, dreaming of getting an overseer for love pleasures, seducing dozens of decent citizens. And other indescribable creatures were collected in this prison for especially dangerous criminals. Aiden walked along the corridor, turning off the lights at night, realizing that things were getting worse and worse. His name alone was no longer enough to keep the prisoners. Passing by another cell where a creature with many snakeheads sat, hissed to the warden that the mountains would no longer shake on his behalf, and then added that now he was a piece of shit, especially after her poison got into him 3 years ago. The creature dreamed of tearing Aiden into pieces and savoring each of them, and so each of those sitting dreamed of the same. The man walked with 2 guards, hearing ridicule. From all sides one could hear how weak and pitiful he had become. The half-man, half-animal grabbed onto the bars and growled that he would kill him at the first opportunity. He had no strength left. Then Aiden summoned bright sunlight with a trick, and the half-man, half-animal screamed. It became indignant that prisoners also have rights. The man, meanwhile, was reflecting that in 2 months of sleepless nights, he had managed to learn only the most basic spells, like this flash. He understood that any of the prisoners could tear him to pieces. He walked further and thought about not sending such prisoners to him anymore. Moving to another compartment, he saw chaos and guards lying on the floor. Who hasn't been on the floor yet, screaming at them not to move? In general, it's a familiar picture for Aiden. At this time, a new prisoner was brought in. One of the guards noticed that this one was sentenced to execution and was not particularly friendly. The bound werewolf girl was furious and cursed everyone around her. Taking the case of a new prisoner, Aiden Garrett learned that the werewolf girl's name was Veronica, and she was a former Silver City mounted police officer who, during an investigation into the sale of counterfeit alcohol, shot and killed a bar owner. Scrolling through the history of the crime, at the end there was a sentence of death. The prison doctor put the werewolf to sleep and a seemingly ordinary girl was already lying in front of them. Aiden ordered the prisoner to be taken to the locker room and the girl was carried away. One of the accompanying guards asked the warden to stay. Aiden said that it had already been a month since he applied for additional prison cells, but he had not received an answer, and if this continued, a riot could not be avoided. The guard chuckled and asked how many years Aiden had been working as a warden and still didn't understand how everything worked. He continued to remind that there are more than 1,000 prisoners in the prison, maintenance is expensive, and most of the prisoners live for thousands of years. Our hero answered what all this had to do with him. The guard answered honestly that a group of prisoners died under mysterious circumstances, but in general this was a joyful event. Because of this, a rally was held in the center in support of the extermination of magical creatures. There was a small group of support from other races. They timidly stood and tried to remind that these creatures at one time helped to return the earth. The warden got the message, that is, he must find a way to kill the prisoners in order to calm the public. He did not agree with this. The guard shrugged his shoulders, noting that it was Lord Aiden who was to blame for what was happening. It was he who placed so many prisoners in prison, and the people were rebelling, believing that while those in the cells were fattening on everything ready-made, they were leading to a miserable existence. He added that there are still people at the top who want to keep the prison. But to do this, they need to kill a couple of prisoners to reduce public discontent. When leaving, he offered to kill Veronica in defense. Anyway, she was already on death row. Those who differed from the human race were considered different in the Silver City. To fight a common enemy in the past, people collaborated with magical creatures for some time. As a reward for participating in the war, they received equal rights with the citizens of the earth. When the war ended, hunger, poverty, and devastation covered the earth. People needed an outlet. The nobles secretly blamed other races for everything, and so Aiden had to compromise. In this world, talking about moral and ethical standards is a stupid dream. He needs to choose a date and a prisoner to kill. Aiden and his assistant were thinking about where to put the werewolf Veronica. There are no more free cells. Most have several prisoners. And then it dawned on the girl, what if we add a werewolf to a succubus? The succubus did not take her loving eyes off the warden, reminding her that the two of them could easily fit on her bed. Aiden asked her in surprise if she shouldn't have been released yesterday. The assistant noticed that she was back to her old ways, knocking out other succubi, and as a result, many men were hospitalized. Aiden screamed in hysterics, "Why does she always get into something?" To which the succubus said offendedly that because of a tiny mistake, she became a repeat offender and received another year of imprisonment. Then, she made a languid face and said that we could always come to an agreement. She was waiting for him in her cell in the evening, and winked. Aiden's mouth opened slightly in surprise and he asked if she really agreed to everything. To which the succubus cheerfully, with eyes glowing with happiness, confidently said that absolutely everything. A few minutes later, new Veronica, still lying unconscious, was brought into her. The succubus widened her eyes, not expecting something like this, and screamed who she was. To which the warden replied that this was her new neighbor, and if something unexpected happened, she should immediately inform the guards. Aiden asked the doctors to prepare more tranquilizers. They said that everything would be ready today. Lord Garrett noticed that they are not so young anymore. They need to have a good rest and be with their families. Everything can be done tomorrow. Today was a full moon day. The moon shone very brightly and filled everything around with a silvery glow. Aiden worked tirelessly to prepare tranquilizers. The full moon is a very turbulent time. The werewolf. Veronica watched the process, wondering if it was possible to overcome a werewolf with tranquilizers during the full moon. At this time, the succubus had no less difficult thoughts. She began to suspect the warden of being gay, which she shared with her neighbor. Aiden was preparing tranquilizers from belladonna when suddenly Veronica firmly stated that she had been wrongly sentenced. At that moment, the converted Veronica appeared in front of the cowering succubus girl and looked at the poor fellow with wolf-like enraged eyes. Card of 1 Vampire. Ophelia prisoner, capable of drinking blood and turning into a bat. Danger level B, 200 milliliter. Give human blood on odd-numbered days. 500 milliliter on even-numbered days. Bird's blood. The next morning, Aiden's assistant read out the prisoner's petition, and the tiger girl asks to buy a second comb. At different times of the year, she needs different combs to care for her fur. Next, Katrin from Cell 6 made a request to buy a dagger. She needed it to protect herself from evil spirits. Aiden said to tell this Catherine that there is no need to think that the security are idiots. And in conclusion, a request from the succubus from Cell 13 for early release. Aiden will thank him personally in his cell. Aiden asked her to tell her that one more such request and he will twist her neck with his own hands. At this time, the prison doctor ran out of breath, calling on everyone to make way. He flew into Aiden and yelled that there was a full moon yesterday. He only remembered this in the morning. For the new Veronica, what he gave was extremely little. The dose should be 10 times larger. During the full moon, werewolves are especially bloodthirsty, and the succubus is in the same cell with her. Aiden dropped what he was doing and they hurried to the cell. During this period of time, the prisoners were taken out for a walk in the fresh air. They watched as the succubus hung from behind on Veronica and cooed something affectionately to her. The doctor breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the succubus was all right. Aiden said that he had been watching them at night. Everything was calm, nothing special. The werewolf behaved calmly. In the morning, she even made her bed. For such a bloodthirsty maniac, she behaves very intelligently. Veronica stood in the prison yard near the statue. The doctor looked at her carefully and then asked if it was really her. Veronica looked at the stone statue of a man holding a child. The doctor said that the new werewolf is a bloodsucker. That's the reason for her obedience. Aiden was surprised what kind of subspecies this was, but the doctor replied that this is a type of werewolves that have a special relationship with people. 100 years ago, humans and werewolves were besieged by demons in a castle for several months, running out of food and supplies. Even though they were allies due to hunger, exhaustion, humans and werewolves were suspicious of each other. People were afraid that the werewolves would eat them, and the werewolves would attack and kill people. A civil war could start at any moment. And then a man named Lord Bayou killed his horse and gave it to the werewolves as food, and also expressed his readiness to give away the dead child. This gesture greatly impressed the werewolf commander, and the conflict was settled. And from that moment on, a group of these werewolves began to bear the title of bloodsuckers. Over time, they moved away from other werewolves and followed people helping them in everything. They had to engage in sophisticated masochistic practices during the full moon in order to control their rage and live among people. And now, hatred of other races flourishes more than ever, and there are very few of these werewolves at the present time, the assistant warden noted. The doctor protested against the execution of such a creature because they went to great lengths to live among people. There were cases when people beat them to death. Aiden thought about this after hearing about the nature of these creatures. At this time, the guard rushed in, shouting that the werewolf girl had gone crazy and committed a massacre in the shower. Aiden loaded the revolver and noticed that she seemed different from her kind. At this time, the guards had difficulty restraining the prisoners, who were shouting that there was blood everywhere and they had not signed up for this. Aiden entered the shower room. The succubus was lying unconscious. The new girl was tied up and placed in front of the warden. The cellmates were screaming for this crazy woman to be shot right now. Putting a gun to Veronica's head, Aiden asked her why she attacked her neighbors. Prisoner Catherine, who was imprisoned for horse theft, shouted that this was a werewolf who was capable of anything when he went crazy. And then she added with a smile that a werewolf bloodsucker could easily snack on them. The neighbors demanded to put a bullet in the werewolf's forehead, or they would kill her themselves. No one wanted to risk their lives. Aiden stood in confusion. The guards tried to calm the indignant prisoners. The warden sternly turned to Veronica that there are strict rules here, and this should not go beyond the prison. He will reschedule the execution date. She has something to add. Veronica calmly replied that she had been thinking about this for a long time, that the case was fabricated. Why was she not allowed to speak out earlier? She calmly looked at the barrel of the gun, noting that he had obviously been waiting for her death for a long time. Aiden looked into the calm eyes of the werewolf. Calls were heard from all sides to kill her. He remembered the doctor's words that there were cases when such werewolves did not resist and were beaten to death. Aiden pressed his finger on the trigger of the gun. At that moment, he imagined himself surrounded by bottles, lying around in some barn. How could he live in peace after killing an innocent person? He slowly took the revolver away from Veronica's face and pointed it upward. Aiden ordered the girl to be taken to the interrogation room because there was not enough evidence. Prisoner Catherine of the human race, caught stealing horses, has extraordinary riding abilities, should not be allowed near horses. Veronica sat during the interrogation and said that when she entered the shower room, an argument ensued. Two prisoners cornered the succubus and threatened her. The girl simply stood up for her, which the warden recorded and ordered the werewolf to be taken away. She shouted that he was not like that. Let him believe her. She is not a murderer. Aiden said he's read the case and wants to know where she was the day of the murder. Veronica remembered that she had detained a counterfeit liquor dealer. His wife came to the police station to appeal this decision, but Veronica did not pay attention to this. In the evening, she was found shot in the head, to which Aiden asked if she didn't shoot, why they didn't find one cartridge in the weapon. When the victim was killed, Veronica went to visit a friend's grave in an old cemetery. It had been deserted for a long time. There wasn't even a guard. She didn't give her weapons to anyone. Lord Gerd exhaled heavily and said that she had no alibi. Suddenly, Veronica shouted passionately that this is her identity. She started with a small militia in a small town and grew to be a member of the mounted police. She was respected in the village. She saved many lives and caught many criminals. I caught a cult leader sacrificing people, thereby saving thousands of lives, but that's not enough. He walked up to the bars where the werewolf was locked and said that this did not prove that she did not kill. The number of people saved will not overcome this murder and the judges will not be convinced, the warden added. The girl was completely depressed. She didn't think that by saving so many people she wouldn't be able to save herself. Having ordered Veronica to be taken to her cell, Aiden sat lost in his thoughts, replaying the defendant's story in his head. At this time, he was informed that the succubus had come to her senses and was being taken to him for interrogation. Megan brought her, although this is not her responsibility. Megan profited from the succubus's money. Since she was quite rich, the succubus immediately rushed to Veronica's defense, declaring that she was innocent. Then, with a proud look, she began to talk about the incident. She's a famous entrepreneur in the Silver City. And those new ones, Catherine the horse thief and Anna the pirate, lay in wait for her and blackmailed her. Just when she thought she was done for, Veronica intervened and gave them a hard time, telling them in detail how she hit Catherine across the bridge of her nose and knocked her accomplice to the floor. When asked by the warden how she herself ended up on the floor, the succubus embarrassedly said that she simply stepped on a bar of soap on the floor and passed out in such an annoying way. She added that she believes Veronica was falsely accused of murder. Aiden conducted the interrogation in detail, reconstructing the picture of the incident from the words of the succubus. The picture with a bar of soap on the floor and an absurd fall looked especially interesting. The succubus said in a low voice that her race can penetrate people's dreams while they are sleeping. And she penetrated. Veronica's world is collapsing because no one believes her. She said that she saw in a dream that she was framed. Aiden noted how he could be sure she wasn't interfering with her sleep. And then the succubus screamed that he was going to condemn an innocent man. The warden's heart began to beat wildly. He again saw a picture of painful death. And the succubus added that her conscience was clear. She told the truth. He again saw a picture of a painful death. And the succubus added that her conscience was clear. She told the truth. This picture and the fear of torment due to a mistake drove him crazy. It was not easy for Megan to take away the resisting succubus girl, who was screaming that Aiden was the man of her dreams, and she had paid a lot of money to go to jail to meet him. The warden was in despair. This whole picture haunted him. What if the werewolf was innocent and she was executed? How would he live with this? He and his assistant studied Veronica's file, which said that the defendant lost control of her emotions and shot the victim in a rage. But usually when werewolves attack, they rarely use weapons, the assistant noted. She is still a mounted police writer. It was difficult for the girl to reach a verdict, but she was more inclined towards innocence. Aiden noticed that she came to this conclusion after reading a few lines. Lord Gerd added that the more he delved into this matter, the more questions he had. Then, the assistant asked what it was about this new girl that they were spending so much time studying her case. As he left, he replied that killing an innocent person was worse than eating a tub of shit. The moon was shining brightly. The succubus was leafing through a magazine with very masochistic pictures. Making rumbling sounds, she prevented others from falling asleep. When they shouted to shut up, she yelled irritably that she needed it for her health. She was still young, and they were 1,000-year-old women. At some point, she felt someone's finger pressing into her back. Turning around and seeing the face of the warden, the succubus didn't understand whether she was sleeping or whether this was reality. A mad passion overtook her and she rushed at the man. The warden had to throw the excited poor fellow down and close his mouth. He pressed the succubus's lips and said that she wants to help Veronica. That's why he's here. Veronica was sleeping and it was the right time to crawl into her subconscious. The warden noticed that it's not often that you get help from her, to which she answered offendedly that she knows how to be grateful because Veronica saved her. The succubus took the sleeping Veronica's hand and asked the Lord if he was ready to plunge into the girl's sleep. He nodded as a sign of readiness, ordering him not to add anything of his own. He felt her finger at his temple and reality began to blur, and the words of the succubus that she was not able to change anything, only show. And now he sees a lot of dead werewolves, blood, and the words of the killer that the rumors are true, these werewolves do not fight back. Veronica screams in tears that they shouldn't die like this, they didn't hurt people. They leave and say that they keep their promises. It is their nature. She remains alone. The girl screams for help, tries to find someone, but there is no one. A wooden puppet man in a judge's outfit appears, takes her hands and clarifies that it is true that they have begun a hunt for her subspecies. They will find the killer. Before she has time to thank her, she finds herself in shackles, and he, scary and tall, towers over her with burning eyes, accusing her of murdering a man. She tries to justify herself that she did not kill, but the terrible voices of puppets are heard from everywhere calling her a murderer. Next, you can see the blow of the judge's gavel and the sentence of death. Veronica covers her ears and screams why no one believes her. She didn't kill, and so he and the succubus return to reality again. Veronica began to toss and turn and could wake up at any minute. The succubus asked why Gerd simply couldn't vouch for the prisoner, to which Gerd replied that she didn't understand everything. The judge would insist on execution, because the dead couldn't speak. But then he remembered about Arsena the necromancer. That's right, that's who can help. And then they heard voices welcoming the arrival of the senator to the Rosa prison. Aiden entered the office where Senator Anthony was waiting for him. He did not turn around when he heard that the warden was in the room. Aiden was the first to turn to him, noting that coming to Rosa in the middle of the night was not the best idea. Wrong assumptions might arise. The senator, without looking at Gerd, asked him to think about himself and not involve others in his problems. In response to a silent question, Senator Anthony continued to scold the warden. He had heard rumors that Aiden was intensively investigating the case of a criminal sentenced to death, instead of killing the prisoner, so that the prison would not cease to exist. Aiden noted that the senator had an excellent informant, to which he replied that he owned the local newspaper. He threw a newspaper on the table in which on the first page there was an article about a bloodthirsty werewolf and an unfortunate victim who was torn to pieces. He continued, "What if in the next issue there will be an article about Aiden as a legend of the Silver City dispensing justice?" They both presented a photo of the warden as a hero savior on the front page. The senator tried to convey to the warden that he was trying with all his might to present it, but Gerd did not understand what he was doing. Having killed one maniac, Lord Aiden will become the hero of the city. He will be admired, loved, and they will be able to save the prison. Then he asked Aiden why he was conducting an investigation if there was a court decision, to which our hero replied that there were a lot of inconsistencies in the case. At this statement, the senator lost his temper and yelled, did he understand that this was tantamount to a slap in the face of justice, the court, the committee members would feel hostility towards both the warden and Rosa. He looked into Aiden's eyes and asked him to come to his senses. Now is not the time for self-will. Then let him investigate what he wants. But now he needs to get on the pedestal so as not to lose what he has. He agreed that there were many unjust sentences in the Silver City, but now he had to endure it. Outside the window, it was pouring rain and thunder roared. Lightning flashed. Lord Aiden Gerd sat in his office and thought about what to do. What to do? He stood up and walked across the dark room. He opened a secret cabinet with documents behind which there was a safe, pressing the desired combination. The opening in the wall opened. The door to a secret underground passage opened. It was very dark. The warden held a lantern in front of him. It seemed that there would be no end to the stairs. Suddenly, he heard a loud voice coming from the depths of the dungeon that he was hatching a very dangerous plan. The man asked how she knew about it, to which he received the answer. When people make difficult decisions, they need the support of loved ones and friends. In this world, she knows him better than anyone. In the dungeon sat a huge girl with wings behind her back and burning eyes, chained in shackles. She pulled as hard as she could. The shackles rang loudly and smiled and said that he had come to her again. Our hero didn't wait long and said that he was investigating the case of the man who had been pecked. She looked at him with her wise and piercing eyes and added, "But he doesn't know what the consequences might be." He was once again amazed at how she knew everything, as a huge board and checkers with symbols appeared in front of him. Meliferia, the goddess of conspiracies, sat in front of him and offered to play. If he wins, he will receive an answer to his question. Aiden agreed and began his move, moving the huge checker. His checker was beaten by the figure of the goddess. She noticed that Aiden was distracted and not focused on the game. Continuing the game, the warden shared his opinion with Meliferia that someone from the top was behind the werewolf case. The case was fabricated, and the police quickly passed a verdict. Aiden looked at his move and continued to say that he was under pressure. He needed to kill the werewolf or the prison would be closed. The goddess asked him if the Lord had ever wondered why a prison for dangerous criminals was built in such a large city. With all these magic circles, symbols, and silver, a whole chain of symbols and signs lit up around Meliferia. She continued, "What is there to be afraid of at the top? Closing the prison is a move, in order to collect more votes. But until she closes the prison here." Aiden looked at her. She reminded him that he should take good care of her. If she escaped, there would be no need for this prison. Aiden said that he had already killed an innocent person in the past and did not want a repetition. The goddess smiled and told him that he was weak in spirit. He had no comrades. How was he going to fight? Aiden told her that he wanted to use the power of the 3 prisoners with whom he had a contract. Remembering the cheerful trio, he explained that he wanted to use their hands to hide his identity. The goddess noted that pretending is one thing, but the question here is about coercing the prisoners, whether it will cause a riot and whether he can handle it. Aiden reasoned that he received requests from prisoners every day. He knew their desires and would be able to suppress discontent. With a smile, Meliferia reminded that there was not much time left. The warden thoughtfully thought out loud that it was possible to involve other prisoners with superpowers. And then it dawned on the man, because he can look at who has what abilities according to the prisoner's dossier. And he decided for himself that he would bribe them with gifts in exchange for their abilities. There are thousands of prisoners in Rosa Prison. With their strength, you can achieve your goal. Lord Gerd seemed to have a moment of clarity. The puzzle was beginning to come together. So he had dozens of possibilities and options for solving the problem. At that moment, the goddess's face leaned towards him, and she ingratiatingly asked if he knew what he needed to do to lose to her. Aiden looked at her tensely, a trickle of cold sweat dripping down his face. Seeing his fear, she laughed, saying that in mind games a person cannot defeat her. But next time she wants to play airplane chess, and this time she will let him go. He was leaving, and heard her voice after that. It took her a lot of effort to call his dissolute soul into this world, so he should not let her down. The warden entered the cell of Arson the Necromancer. Rumors about the succubus's visit to the cell were already circulating around the prison. He interrupted her and began to ask about the dead. She looked at him in surprise, asking since when had the warden been interested in corpses. Arsena herself was originally a living dead, sentenced to life for raising the dead, causing the plague and other pranks. And now, listening to Aiden's request, she put on a business-like appearance and declared that she was being exploited. She gave him a magic pendant and offered to do everything himself. Just stand next to the corpse and activate it. To his horror that such an object was with her in the cell, the necromancer reassured him, assuring him that this pendant would not rescue her from prison. She wears it as an accessory. She is a girl. It is part of her image. Arsena showed Aiden how to activate the pendant. Something appeared before them, screaming and glowing, so that the warden was thrown aside. For a couple of minutes he could not move. Arsena cooed sweetly that she had simply shown how to summon the dead. He stood with his back to her, and the girl thought that he obviously couldn't come to his senses from anger. The thought flashed through her head that people in general are nervous by nature, and a person like him certainly shouldn't be angered. She had already seen pictures of hellish flames and an abyss of fire that she was seriously scared. He still stood with his back to her. Arsena tried to justify herself by saying that she had told her not to come here. Suddenly, he turned to her with a radiant smile and said, since she loved books so much, how would she consider it if he brought her a couple of brand new bestsellers here? After this, Arsena was seriously frightened. She thought that the boss had changed his mind after what he saw. He left, and she wondered since when did he become so cute. At night, Aiden was already in the cemetery and was digging one of the graves. Having dug up the grave and opened the coffin, he saw that the deceased did not have a body. There was an urn with ashes. He wondered if it was possible to summon a dead man in this case. He took out the pendant and activated it as Arson taught him. Nothing happened. Then he began to try again. The pendant glowed, but no one appeared. The cemetery watchman stood behind with a lantern, thinking about who was running around here at this hour, when suddenly he saw luminous bodies in front of him and with his eyes bulging and screaming, ran. Aiden turned around and wondered what had even happened. When the souls of the departed began to rise from their graves, glowing, Aiden asked for forgiveness for disturbing him. There were many of them. More and more souls were arriving, illuminating everything around. He thought that he had underestimated the pendant. It didn't work with the ashes, so he needed to look for another way. Then a dead thing crawled to his feet with burning eyes and growling, who disturbed her peace. The man said that her killer was still at large, let her tell who killed her, and he would take revenge. The dead thing wheezed that she didn't have much time. She tried to say the name. Then a flash of emerald light appeared, blinding, so that the warden closed his eyes. He saw a picture of her being thrown to the ground and a male voice asking if she wanted everyone to know that her husband had been caught selling counterfeit goods. The woman screamed for him to let her go. She paid him. And after that, he shoots the woman. She dies. She disappeared and asked to avenge her, but Aiden shouted for her to name the killer. He was overcome with impotent anger. What to do now? How to figure out who it was? Although if you think about it, you can find some clues in this. You just need to think carefully. Our hero began to remember fragments of what he had seen. The man who shot the costume was typical of a mounted police officer. Probably after the murder, this man missed work in order to fabricate evidence against Veronica. The mounted police officer has access to weapons and could well have pulled out the cartridge. The next morning, Aiden came to meet with the keeper of the armory. The custodian, whose name was Bruce, opened the door to his office. Aiden noticed his uncertainty and thinness. Bruce was very surprised that he could see Lord Aiden himself with his own eyes. Putting on a casual appearance, Aiden said that he had a problem with his revolver, so he thought of stopping by here while passing the police station. The guy asked with a smile what was wrong with the Lord's weapon. Still smiling radiantly, the supervisor said that the drum was not spinning. Suddenly, the guy trembled, began to sweat, and said that he needed a few days to do this, since he was very busy with work. Aiden agreed, thinking to himself that this was clearly not a killer. He remembered the physique of the killer from the vision, and looking at this frail physique of the boy, he realized that it was not him. As Gerd walked out, he thought that he couldn't be scared off in order to go after a bigger fish. Bruce was standing in thought when his friend called out to him, remembering how much fun they had with the girls yesterday. But he was not in the mood for a conversation. Aiden couldn't get out of Bruce's head. Maybe it was a coincidence and his weapon really broke. And then he heard a group of men gathered and animatedly discussing something. The cemetery watchman said that a man stood in front of the grave of the innkeeper, and all the ghosts bowed before him. Bruce pricked up his ears and listened, as the watchman told what he saw and how he ran headlong. How terrible this picture was. He was like a ghost himself, listening to new details. That the deceased was thirsting for revenge. Her voice sounded clearly. Could not be confused with anyone. The poor keeper curled up in the blanket out of fear and was afraid to move. Aiden decided to use a magical crystal ball to call the ravens to keep an eye on Bruce. The warden thought it very suspicious that he had hidden. Using the ball, he summoned Dolly, one of the most powerful witches. She sat as if in rows, seeing the warden with a smile, and asked how she could be useful. He reminded her of the benefits of cooperation with him. After she subdued and led away the wild animals from the zoos, Lord Aiden subdued her. She remembered that she was here by his grace. She laughed, turning it all into a joke. She's a prisoner, that's all. She was just joking. Aiden promised to help in return, in terms of what he could do, but so that she would not take it for granted. He noticed that many prisoners do not manage to acclimatize in prison, cannot get used to the local food, and he is going to buy desserts. When the warden started talking about how he was going to buy a honey cake from a pastry shop on 7th Street, the witch began to salivate. She was already imagining this cake in her mouth. Then she laughed and said that everyone would definitely like the cake. Lord Gerd was nervous. It was already late, but there was no progress. He took the magic ball to see how Bruce was doing. He was sleeping soundly. Suddenly a crash was heard and he jumped up screaming madly. Bruce feverishly wondered where the sound was coming from. Maybe the glass had been broken, but no, there was a roof above. Suddenly, black tentacles crawled towards him from above. He screamed like a victim so that no one would approach him. He tried to convince himself that this was just a bad dream. And at that time, the tentacles enveloped him from all sides. And then the face of a dead man appeared in front of him, telling Bruce that he was mortally offended. Wearing only his shorts, the keeper ran out into the street, screaming that he was being haunted by a ghost. Aiden looked at this picture through the ball as the guy yelled that they should ask the culprit. The warder stood in the cell with a burning torch, and in front of him stood the deceased woman who had completed the task. It was the dead siren, whom Aiden rested. Her powers were stored in a voodoo doll and had the ability to penetrate the world of the dead. Aiden promised to keep the doll, but he would also keep an eye on her to make sure she didn't throw anything away. Siren asked the Lord if he was afraid that he would be laughed at for using prisoners for such things. Aiden chuckled. laughing at him for trying to dispense justice. He recalled how she herself turned into a dead man to avenge her son. So now she is helping a woman like herself. At this time, Bruce ran through the next street screaming that the ghost would catch him. People looked at him as if he were crazy. He ran to one of the houses, knocked, saying that the ghost of a murdered woman from the tavern was chasing him. He was dragged inside by a man in a robe, asking why he was yelling so much so that the whole city would know. Seeing a familiar face, Bruce was glad that he was under the protection of Jalen. He ordered them to follow him as they walked along the dark street. Bruce told in detail about the pursuit of the dead thing, even how the horse touched his face. Bruce lost his nerve again and again, yelled that some big shot had come out to attack them. His acquaintance ordered him to shut his mouth, saying that these were nothing more than the practices of local necromancers. Jalon grabbed the guy, noticing that Veronica was also involved, and if she gets out of prison, they will all be in trouble. The guy yelled that he couldn't stand another meeting with a ghost. Jalen said irritably that getting to know people like Bruce is a real punishment. He took him to his house, showing him a magical system of protection from necromancers and any evil spirits. Bruce appreciated the professional approach and asked if Jalen expected the dead innkeeper to return for revenge. He looked at the guy and said that he had many enemies, including her. If Bruce wants to stay with him, he must understand that the road to power is paved with corpses. Aiden at this time asked Veronica about Jalen, whether she knew him and what the relationship was between them. Veronica remembered how she was preparing her horse, getting ready to patrol, when Jalen approached her, asking if she had thought about his proposal. He offered her to spend a couple of nights with him in exchange for a promotion. Her response that she was not interested in him angered Jalen. He raised his hand to hit her, but Veronica intercepted the blow. He insulted her, calling her a dirty and shameless creature. After this, Veronica was sentenced to death in this prison. Aiden was not surprised. Rich people like Jalen, if they don't get what they want, they simply trample underfoot, and he asked to tell more about this man. Approaching one of the prisoners, he asked her how she was doing. He showed a stack of letters saying that they were not sent, and it is not surprising, because whoever reads them ends badly. He reminded her that she had unique abilities that others could not achieve. Aiden offered a deal. She helps him get one coward out of the house, proving that she can be trusted. The creature that the fisherman caught did not belong to any race. When she wrote letters to them, they all fell into madness. Having broken the window into the room where Bruce was sleeping, a bird flew in with a letter. The guy stood up wondering what just happened. Having opened the letter, his face began to change. It was not entirely clear what was written, but horror and panic began to overwhelm him. I began to feel very dizzy. Pictures of fire, chaos. The room swam before my eyes. Bruce went to the window where the bird had made a hole and looked out into the street. Jalon heard his screams and went up to him to find out what happened. Bruce, with wild screams, again in his shorts, rushed past Jalen, who was calling him. Bruce, with his face twisted in horror, shouted that the end of the world had already come. Chaos had come. Jalon called the butler and ordered him to catch this madman. Bruce saw a surreal picture in which huge tentacles surrounded him on all sides. There was no one else in this world except him. He felt like he was in a terrible vacuum. And then he sees in front of him the angry ghost of the tavern owner who came to kill him. He shouted for her to leave him and not touch him. Bruce lay in the courtyard of Jalen's house, seeing the butler who was trying to calm him down from the late innkeeper. As a result, he yelled at her not to touch him. It was Jalon who shot. Jalon angrily took the gun, intending to finish off this idiot. And Bruce fell at the feet of the ghost he saw and begged for forgiveness. The keeper sobbed and muttered that, "Let the one who is guilty pay." At that moment, a bullet touched him. It hit his glasses and earlobe, and the guy began another attack of madness. At first, he imagined a crow attacking him, but then the real picture was revealed and he realized that it was Jalon who was shooting. He was on his knees, not knowing what to do. The frightened butler ran away. Jalon again aimed at Bruce's face, saying that he himself had called for his own death. Before he could shoot, a flock of crows flew at Jalen, knocking him down, which gave Bruce the opportunity to get to his feet. He ran as fast as he could, screaming and begging for salvation without looking back. He then slipped and fell into a hole that looked suspiciously like a grave. Lying down, he saw a sign with a tombstone. It was Veronica's grave. And then dark shadows approached Bruce from all sides. He screamed so that they would not approach him. These were shadow ghosts rising from the graves and trying to surround the guy. And now he is already running along the city street, demolishing everything in his path, people calling him an idiot and shouting after him. In his clouded mind, he saw not a city square but a cemetery and ghosts chasing him. And so he approached another glowing tombstone and saw his date of birth. name, and signature that a notorious scumbag rested here. He gasped in horror, realizing that this was his grave. Jalan appeared before his eyes and told him that if he wants to stay with him, he must remember that the road to power is paved with corpses. Bruce realized that it was the souls of the people killed by Jalan that were haunting him. Looking at them, Bruce asked either them or himself whether the same fate awaited him. The ghosts began to disappear, dissolving into a greenish fog. And so Bruce sees around him a city square on which he stands half-naked and people passing by him. He heard that the townspeople were calling him a sick psycho who was talking to himself. And so he sits repentantly in Aiden's office and gives his testimony with tears in his eyes. He is ready to act as a witness in the case of an innocent person in this prison. He admitted to Aiden that he changed the bullets in Veronica's weapon, for which Jalan gave him money. He tearfully asked only to protect him. Aiden decided that he would be safer in prison. Jalan was on horseback looking for Bruce. He ordered the butler to find him wherever he was. A servant ran towards him shouting that Lord Aiden knew about the crime committed. The warden had been tracking the suspect through the witch's magic ball and decided it was time to capture Jalan. Having mounted his horse, Aiden went to catch the criminal, ordering him to cancel all meetings. The little rat jumped off the back of the running horse and went into the cell. She ran to the one she served. Arsena the necromancer looked at the little stranger in surprise. A hand appeared from the cell and the rat jumped on the hand. The voice said that Dolly was very brave. How many times she helped out the warden, but at this critical moment she ran away. It was the witch Dolly, who lost faith in the power of Lord Gerd. She saw how the dead frightened him in the cemetery, and the fact that he turned to prisoners for help. Arsena answered the witch's thoughts. She doesn't care what the warden really is, as long as it doesn't affect her comfort in this prison, and again buried herself in reading the book. Dolly noted that she does not plan to stay in this prison for the rest of her life. If Aiden is really not real, then there is nothing to worry about at all. She saw that Aiden was in for a trap, so let's see how he gets out of this situation, she thought. Someone stood on a tree and watched the jumping warden, saying that it was time to test what she was capable of. Veronica, sensing something was wrong, began screaming to be let out. The warden was in danger. Dolly waved her hand indifferently and told her to stop yelling. The guards approached the cell. Veronica was shaking and she assured that the smell of the person chasing Aiden seemed familiar to her. The succubus reminded that werewolves have an excellent sense of smell. They need to release her to save Lord Aiden. The werewolf in desperation asked to be released, but they just looked at her silently. They decided that the prisoner was simply taking them for idiots and wanted to play a prank in order to escape. At that moment, Aiden Friend's assistant appeared and ordered Veronica to be released under her responsibility. Besides, all the facts about her innocence were in hand, and she would be released soon anyway. The guards looked at Frenda in surprise. But after a couple of seconds, they turned to the cell where Veronica was sitting and began to open the lock. The witch muttered offendedly that she would complain about such injustice. Not only werewolves have a good sense of smell. The little funny elf screamed that she was curious to know what was happening. Let them tell her. The succubus declared victoriously. Since she is the official girlfriend of Lord Aiden, she was personally brought up to date. Jared was rushing away from the warden when something began to attack him. He waved his hand away, screaming to get away from him. Aiden knocked him down as he walked, causing him to fall off his horse. A minute later, Jalan was lying on the ground, and the warden was suspecting him of committing a crime. At that moment, the warden's horse reared up and he grabbed the reins so as not to fly off. A sharp saber slashed the animal, cutting its belly. Aiden felt that he was losing his balance. The dead horse lay on the ground. Jared and the stranger stood nearby. The stranger told Jared to run. He would teach the warden a lesson himself. As Jared ran away, he turned to Lord Gerd and introduced himself as a bounty hunter. Hunter White was hired by Jared. He took on the most difficult assignments, and the poet was very happy to end the life of the warden. He stated that if he kills the legendary warden Aiden, he will get rich. The next second, he rushed at Aiden with lightning speed. He was truly a professional in his field, not allowing the warden to dodge. Another minute and Lord Aiden would have been dead, but suddenly they heard some noise. Veronica, who was beginning to transform, rushed at the hunter from above. She broke through the magical protection that White surrounded himself with for invulnerability. Aiden was amazed to see her here. How she could get out of prison, but the girl shouted at him to catch up with the criminal. She takes it upon herself. He wanted to help her, but he understood that by this time Jared would have time to run far away. He saw the headhunter's sharp saber, which easily cut his horse. Telling Veronica to be careful, he rushed to catch up with Jared. White was pissed off at this girl who thought she could beat a pro like him. He rushed with a saber at Veronica, who was able to dodge in a matter of seconds. Seeing the clouds of smoke in front of her, she couldn't figure out where White was. He jumped out to cut her, remembering how many years ago he trained his skills on werewolves, and then one girl ran away. The girl was gasping for breath. Her eyes were watering. She was making her way through the smoky veil. She saw a figure similar to White and rushed at her. Veronica, gathering all her reserves of strength, hit the standing figure. But it turned out to be a hunter's cloak on a tree branch. He jumped out with a crazy grin, deciding at that moment to finish off Veronica. Having thrown the magic vessel, he laughed and said that she was finished. She would no longer be able to dodge. A vessel with a magic potion revived the tree, which turned into a monster. Its roots were emerging from the ground, and one had already wrapped itself around Veronica's leg. At this time, the bounty hunter, sitting on a tree, pulled a crossbow and shot at the girl. She ran screaming. The arrows pierced and tore her skin until she bled. At that moment, her eyes lit up with yellow fire, and she began to turn, since she was much stronger in the body of a werewolf. Jared was in the city. He made his way past other people, looking around to see if anyone was tracking him, when he suddenly saw Aiden running towards him, cursing that even the bounty hunter could not stop him. The enraged criminal decided to hide between the narrow streets to get lost in the crowd. But at that moment, a cart with logs was driving away and crashed into him, breaking his nose until it bled, and he fell to the ground. Opening his eyes, he saw Aiden standing, who reported that now Jared was not only a participant in the murder, but also the organizer of the attempt on his life. And there was no justification for this. People began to pay attention to them. Aiden, leaning on his cane with one hand, held the revolver with the other and pointed it at Jared, who was twisted with rage, and was rummaging through the inside pocket of his coat, taking out a weapon. Aiden fired a shot, but nothing happened, not a single bullet, but he was loading the weapon. The criminal chuckled. How can the warden kill him now? Meanwhile, taking out his weapon. Our hero cast a light spell, and Jared closed his eyes from the sudden flash. Lord Garrett raised his sword to his throat. The criminal croaked that he had nothing to do with the murder. Why drag him into it? The townspeople were talking about what was happening, and one, hiding behind the cart, asked what their master should do in the hands of Aiden. The crowd murmured indignantly, "This is the same warden from Rosa Prison and he attacked this man." Jared decided to take advantage of the situation and began yelling that they wanted to kill him and ask for help. He never ceased to attract attention by shouting that they wanted to kill him in broad daylight. Aiden ordered to close his mouth, otherwise he promised him something more than just bloodshed. Driven into impotent anger, the criminal decided to use the last opportunity to escape by taking out a knife from his sleeve. He intended to sharply thrust it into Aiden, thinking that he himself would be saved, and he would go to another world. But suddenly his eyes rolled back and he began to fall backwards. Jared was killed. Everyone looked at the gloomy man who shot him so coldly, dead. Jared lay at the feet of the warden. People shouted that they had killed a man. And then Lord Garrett remembered what Veronica told him about Jared, that he was supposedly the illegitimate son of a member of parliament. The man declared for everyone to hear, declaring Veronica innocent, the real culprit being the one he just killed. The man said that the criminal was his son. Because of his incompetence, he allowed his son to act like this, but now he could not allow him to escape responsibility. Bowing to the warden, he asked Aiden to talk to him alone. The man lamented that it was his fault as a father if he had been harsher to his son. People tried to calm him down, amazed at the nobility of Mr. Anthony. Suddenly, everyone turned around to hear a roar like an earthquake. Aiden ran, remembering that Veronica was there if she was okay. Anthony looked unkindly after the fleeing warden, thinking to himself that he was not finished yet. The clearing looked like a battlefield. A burnt tree lay on the ground. The ground itself was scorched. At some point, someone grabbed the guard by the trousers. It was Hunter White lying on the ground. He babbled for help, expecting salvation from the one he had recently tried to kill. This is exactly what Aiden answered him. Why on earth would he save his killer? He, bulging his eyes, remarked that all noble heroes should do this. Lord Garrett looked at him as he called for the law, to which Garrett replied that White's employer was clearly not familiar with it. The owner behind the heads remembered Jared's words that Aiden, with his noble character, would definitely spare him, and in prison he would have better conditions. Aiden looked simply and calmly, thinking about his own things, sighing as if realizing that this was the right thing to do. Jared, thinking what an idiot in front of him, asked him to use magic to lift the tree and free him, since he suspects that he broke his spine. To this, our hero snapped that he did not know such spells, and the real Aiden was no longer there. Then he slowly took out his sword and raised it above the hunter. He realized that death was close and thought, that's why he is so weak in fights. This is not a real warden. Garrett's last words were to say hi to Jade. So Aiden was the last thing that bounty hunter White saw before his death. The warden did not know where Veronica was and began to call her when behind a tree he saw that she had curled up into a ball. She asked him not to approach, but it seemed suspicious to him. Turning behind a tree, he saw Veronica, who was in the process of transformation and without clothes. She screamed in shame. Aiden closed his eyes and exhaled apologetically, because he thought that everything was bad with her. The girl was in half-human form. She was fumbling for something to cover herself with. Her clothes were torn to shreds. She began to pull the dead White's shirt off to get dressed. But then the warden took off his cloak and handed it to the girl. They walked along a city street. Aiden asked Veronica if she had completed her transformation. She replied that as soon as her pulse decreased, she would be fine. Our hero noticed that she did not become a werewolf until the end, to which the girl laughed and said that this was her problem. In her home village and in her family, she was the only one like that, and they constantly laughed and made fun of her. Once, Grandma scattered her relatives with a broom because they were fooling around teasing her. At that time, her mother was alive, who was pregnant at that time. Then the girl sadly added that it would be better if they had never come to the Silver City. Aiden agreed with her, noting that with a character like hers, surviving in this vicious city is really difficult. He invited her to return to the village after her release, but Veronica sadly shook her head. She is ashamed to return because she boasted so much that she would become popular with people. How will she now look them in the eyes? Suddenly they saw a crowd of poorly dressed people. Aiden wondered why there were so many poor people here. There were old people and young people there who asked the police where the Rosa prison was located. Veronica looked at them and couldn't believe it. These were her fellow villagers, relatives. They were looking for her. Local residents passed by and waved them aside as if they were annoying flies. She suddenly remembered how they all came out to see her off and asked her not to forget them, because the village would always be her home. When Veronica left, she promised to save enough money and treat them to the most luxurious restaurant in the Silver City. The girl ran away shouting that she was here. Within a couple of seconds, she was hugged by a crowd of people who loved her, the granny holding her close and not wanting to let go. She cried looking at how grown-up Veronica had become, to which she, beaming with happiness, asked how they ended up here. They said that as soon as they found out that she had gone to prison, they decided to go to the city. There was no post office in their village. It took them half a month to get here. Then Veronica looked at their feet, worn-out shoes, some with toes sticking out of their shoes. They jabbered that they were looking for her all over the city. No one thought that she had been arrested. Seeing Aiden approaching, Veronica burst into tears and asked him not to laugh at her. The crowd began to shout at him why he was holding the girl, to which he hastened to reassure them that this was a misunderstanding and Veronica would soon be acquitted. A couple of gentlemen in expensive outfits looked at the residents. The man angrily barked, calling the crowd poverty, which is not allowed to walk around the city but must sit within the confines of their slums. The girl and the baby offered to go back since everything was resolved so well, but one guy said that Veronica had promised to feed them dinner in a restaurant. Then someone pulled him painfully by the ear and hissed that it was impossible for their Veronica to be seen with a crowd of villagers. She was now a city dweller. The girl was very uncomfortable because she had no money and she felt ashamed. Then Aiden intervened and said that they had come such a long way and should stay here for a couple of days, and Veronica had a bonus in her pocket. The girl widened her eyes in surprise. What kind of bonus? The villagers were no less amazed. Having rummaged in the pocket of the cloak that the warden gave her, she saw a bunch of coins. They were gold pounds. People opened their mouths. For the first time they saw this empire's money with their own eyes. The girl held the money in her hands, not knowing what to do. Then Aiden said, "How about feeding everyone in the restaurant?" At this time, the out-of-breath Frenda ran up with the 2 guards. She breathed out a sigh of relief when she saw the Lord alive. He cheerfully turned to his assistant and invited her to go and have dinner with him, Veronica and her friends at the restaurant. And then, glancing at the taken-aback couple of gentlemen who froze like statues, that there will always be those loafers wandering around the city who will blurt out indecent things towards decent people. Frenda took the hint, took out a weapon. Her partners did the same and menacingly headed towards the gentlemen. They ran away screaming and cursing. Left alone with Veronica, Aiden asked her to accept this money as moral compensation for this whole misunderstanding. A noisy crowd walked down the street. Frenda offered to accompany them, and Veronica could not believe her luck. She turned around and saw Aiden standing and looking into the distance, wondering what he was thinking about. The girl covered her face in her cloak, pulled her hat over her face so that her tears could not be seen, and followed the crowd. Veronica's case went well. Everything was resolved successfully. Anthony did not take a lawyer. During the interrogation, everything became clear. Everything fell into place. It was pouring rain. Anthony did not notice it as he walked past the crowd. He willingly shot his son in the back, so unlike his usual behavior. Aiden and Frenda, looking at him, thought he did this so that the incident would not become public knowledge, so as not to lose his status as a member of the government. Or there were worse things lurking here and they could come to light. After the case was over, Veronica and her fellow villagers returned home to the village. And so he plays with the goddess Malferia in the dungeon, who was interested in whether the prisoners received the promised benefits. To which Aiden noted that it was strange that the goddess was interested in such things. She laughed and replied that it was not about her, but about him. She perfectly understands what people are thinking. Suffering or admitting defeat are two different things. And for Edward, the story is not over yet. She told him that his only means of defense was to effectively use the prisoner's abilities. The game Edward began to play became more and more interesting. There was lunch in the prison. The prisoners approached the cook and received their portion. When Dolly's witch's turn came, she heard behind her being called the warden's little dog. Approaching the distribution, she smiled charmingly and said loudly that there was no other food, since her stomach was bothering her. The cook looked at her without taking the cigarette out of her mouth and answered that there was. She handed her a honey cake and said that it would help restore her stomach and acclimatize. A smiling Dolly left with the cake, while the others shouted that they also had stomach problems, but received regular soup. The necromancer came to the library. One of the prisoners said that she need not look for new books, there are none. The guard bent down and said that they had brought one new one and she had not put it out yet. Happy Arsena ran with a book in her hands, while the girl chased and shouted that she would wash her socks if she gave the book back. Arsena opened the book as she walked, remembering that it was secretly distributed among prisoners only for special merits. The book was about the desires of exotic animals. A forest elf came to the unknown sea creature, declaring that she was now her translator and was sent by the warden. Wood elves read emotions well, and any language is a carrier of emotions. The succubus was taking a shower when behind her, she heard the familiar voices of a pirate and a horse thief, who, rubbing their hands, asked that there was no security anymore and where was the money for them. They saw the bag of money and laughed, and said that she had become smarter since she had already prepared everything. At this time, the tigress Philip and the dragonborn Camilla approached, asking the succubus how to beat these impudent people severely. The succubus just smiled with pleasure. She remembered the warden's promise for her help. When he left the cell after penetrating Veronica's consciousness, she asked him to give her the two offenders, since they went unpunished. When he left, he tossed it to her so she wouldn't overdo it. Standing under the streams of water, she smiled lustfully and told the performers to beat these two half to death. The master sat in the office and gave the order to inform the Queen of Ants that her precious daughter Rose was in prison. The servant tremblingly asked if this was the crazy woman who experiments on people. He replied that yes, Aiden will now answer for everything. The wood elf Galala was one of the prisoners, but with some privileges. Fast, tall, elegant, and deadly. This is clearly not about her. Gilala looked like a cute, plump baby, which had its advantages. This sweet creature ended up in prison due to a drug industry misstep. When she was literally brought in like a rabbit, she thought it was the end. But she had a really good time, went out and walked around the prison. Friend wondered if she was okay, if no one was offending her. But popularity also has its downsides. Not all prisoners understood why her ability to read emotions made her a prison translator. But in fact, her work was very important. The problems of prisoners, for example. How constipation in a sea creature can lead to riots, conflicts. It's like the butterfly effect. She is kind of like an angel of mercy and a savior in this prison. Once again, Aiden asked her about the results, and Galala, with a beaming look, reported on her successes. And then the warden said that there was one more matter, although he was incorrect about it. Galala replied that this was a trifle for her, so she should not doubt her professionalism. But when they came to this prisoner's cell, the little one was speechless as to how this was even possible. From the point of view of the elves' worldview, all things have emotions. Mountains, rivers, even skeletons carry an emotional charge about their life lived. But this girl, an elf, could not understand whether she even belonged to the world of the living. She could not read a single emotion. Gilala described her as a piece of flesh that can only eat and digest food, without thoughts or emotions. Aiden noticed that it seemed to take longer than he thought. The elf saw a cut on the warden's finger, asking what it was. He replied that it was an accidental scratch. He sat in the girl's cell without emotion and began the lesson by reading the fairy tale Cinderella. Gilala looked at them, not understanding what he wanted to achieve so that she could become a normal child. but then it would be easier to teach a bear to ride a bicycle. The market square was buzzing, selling ointments, whitening, hair growth, and anti-wrinkle products. The merchant saw a man who was looking for something. Approaching him, she asked if she could help the gentleman. A merchant dressed in a robe led him into a dark room. This gentleman was looking for her, asking whether her daughter was in Rosa prison. The woman with a sly squint looked at the gray-haired gentleman and asked if they wanted to arrange her escape. The man replied that he could organize her imprisonment so that she could get her out on her own. She reached for her vials, predatorily asking if he was tired of life, if he wanted to imprison her. At that moment, Jared's father came in and said that he didn't need to introduce himself, and she wouldn't get hurt in prison. They had a plan. She glanced at him and remembered that it was Lord Aiden who sued him. He replied that Aiden was their common enemy and gave her the plan for Rosa's prison. He suggested that they familiarize themselves with this document. As for entering the prison, they will try to weaken the effect of the magic circle. His agents are already in prison and will help do everything from the inside. He offered her to act as a mediator, asking if she was interested in the future plan. She laughed, adding that there was clearly someone higher behind him, to which he replied that it was his business. He just wanted Warden Aiden dead. The woman, silently smiling, took out one of her glowing cones. While the men watched her actions, she quickly drank the contents. A second later, spinning in a whirlwind, the one who was called the Ant Queen began to change her appearance. And here she is, a young attractive woman, declaring that her name will be Mary. Her criminal case is smuggling. The men gasped and silently applauded. The girl, without emotions, was reading a book when suddenly she heard a voice in her head saying that her mother was already coming to save her. The girl took her eyes off the book and looked up at the window from where the light was shining. She also looked indifferently towards where her name Evans was heard. Frenda went to a diner in the city and bought herself a sandwich. During a break, she decided to have a snack outside the prison. Walking down the street, she began to eat while walking, lost in her thoughts. Suddenly, she heard footsteps, turned around and saw the shadows of men running away. Frenda glared with displeasure and thought that it was bold of them to pursue her like this in broad daylight. And not for the first time. Suddenly, one of the men jumped out and ran towards her. Without hesitation, the girl took out a pistol and aimed at the stranger. He fell to his knees with a bouquet of flowers. The man, looking reverently at Frenda, handed her a bouquet and offered her to marry him. The girl dropped the sandwich and in silent amazement revealed that she was already married. The fan ran away in tears that his heart was broken. The rest hobbled in all directions, that there was nothing to do. Nothing was going to happen for them. In Friend's office, she gave Aiden a newspaper, showing that Rose is now the most discussed topic. When he was hunting for Jared, this was filmed and recorded by one journalist. The girl also added, embarrassed, that the figures of the guards in their uniforms were being discussed. The journalist describes the security guards as the women of his dreams with ideal proportions. Aiden was delighted. This is not bad at all. The wardens will have admirers because many are unmarried due to the nature of their work. At that moment, knocking, one of the guards came in, saying that she wanted to quit as she had gotten a job at the Calendula Women's Prison. Aiden didn't mind, since there were more prospects there than in the Silver City. The supervisor signed the necessary documents and the employee thanked him for his understanding. At that moment, the prison doctor rushed into the office, saying that he had received documents from the medical institute. Then Aiden thought that he too had decided to leave. And they were not the last. The guards' statements of resignation came one after another. There was surprisingly little security at night, and discussions began in the cells about what was happening. The wood elf was very worried. She felt a tense emotional background. Aiden didn't have time to sign his resignation letter the next morning. Everyone was contacted from somewhere and offered good positions. Frenda heard the girls talking among themselves. The employer offered to date one and invited another to a fashionable restaurant. Frenda was concerned that so many staff leaving would affect the normal functioning of the prison. She asked to work for a month until they found new staff, but they refused to even listen. They attacked Frenda, saying that she wanted them to rot here. Their psyche was already damaged. They would leave anyway. Aiden furiously hit the table with his fist and ordered him to shut up and stop yelling like little children. He reminded them of the honor of the uniform, that they needed to complete their current tasks. They had a responsibility for people's lives. But this did not help. The employees began to throw their weapons and leave. Aiden thought that there would be an article in the newspaper about the dismissal of the guards. He remembered Anthony's face after the meeting and thought to himself, "This is how you decided to take revenge." Dozens of abandoned cylinders, holsters, and weapons lay in the office. Unrest began to spread throughout the prison, the tiger woman screaming that she was hungry. There were only a few guards standing there who ordered her to shut her mouth. No one would go anywhere without Lord Aiden's order. Aiden looked at the entrance to the prison. No one came. Those who left would never return. Frenda was worried that the labor shortage would result in riots. What to do now? Frenda told the warden that the situation was close to catastrophic. At that moment, Veronica looked out from behind a tree and, blushing, asked if they were really recruiting staff. Frenda exclaimed, "Didn't the girl return to the village with everyone then?" Veronica became even more embarrassed when she said that they called her. But she so wants to learn a lot from Lord Aiden. She had been watching them since early morning, and it was strange to her that there were so few people today. At this time, one of the guards jumped out and shouted that a riot was about to begin. Gorgon joyfully felt the taste of freedom and panic among her superiors. The rest, baring their fangs, anticipated how they would come out of their cells and tear the remaining guards to pieces. Jalala felt with every fiber the bloody emotions of rebellion, and she was scared. Back at the prison, the guards told Aiden that things were getting out of control. The succubus called him and asked him to protect him, realizing that in the event of a riot, she too would end up in the meat grinder. How suddenly she saw Veronica emerging from the shadows in uniform. The succubus screamed at her to leave, as real horror was happening here. Lord Aiden sternly asked who the instigator of the riot was, and Veronica walked forward with a confident step. Everyone was amazed. The tigress screamed that the cowardly wolf cub had returned. Apparently things were very bad in prison. Friend, seeing Veronica's confused face, told her that if she didn't manage to gain authority right away, then in the future it would be difficult to communicate with criminals. Veronica pointed her finger at the bandit trio and ordered them to be taken out. They only cackled in response. Before they had time to take them out, the girl, with the fury of a wolf, pinned all three to the floor. All three were lying unconscious on the floor in the corridor. Deathly silence reigned. Veronica asked if anyone wanted to try her fist again. One of the guards admired how such a fragile girl had so much strength. Aiden noticed that Veronica was an excellent student at the police academy, and people from the academy are not particularly kind to other races. The succubus said in admiration, "Wow, let Veronica drop into herself for old time's sake." Veronica smiled as the succubus blew her kisses as Frenda reminded her that she was now a guard. Silver City Treasurer Doug arrived and congratulated Aiden on his ability to run the prison even with minimal resources. He compiled a list of the guards who had left and reported that Rose's allowance was being reduced to $600. Aiden was perplexed, and Frenda shouted that servicing one magic circle costs $650,000. Most of the amount goes to maintaining a magic circle, which, if necessary, can cover the entire city. The remaining $150 are used for prison expenses, for example. Vampires need fresh blood. $55,000 for repairing holes in the walls and other housekeeping work. $15,000 is spent on security salaries, uniforms. Frenda summed up that even if all the security quit, there won't be enough money. Is it really possible to cut the maintenance by $200,000? The treasurer said that he was misunderstood. With Overseer Aiden's abilities and strength, the magic circle no longer needed to work at full strength. The girl screamed that the city would be doomed, and Doug remarked that she doubted the strength of her boss. The treasurer left with the words that everyone believed in the power of Lord Gerd, and Frenda sadly asked what they should do now. Aiden was overcome by the darkest thoughts. Chaos must not be allowed to happen. Then he told the stunned Frenda that she was now his deputy until he was in prison. He tiredly rubbed his eyes and said that he needed to think about how to survive this time. The girl put on her deputy chief's uniform with a determined look. The first to start giggling was the beaten couple that Lord Aiden was not capable of fulfilling his duties and transferred them to others. The words were heard from the cameras, "Why are you here? They threw it at you and you are sitting here for pennies." The girl remembered the words of the warden. The changes that took place in the prison did not look like a mere coincidence. The lack of prison orana, the weakening of the magic circle, is a conspiracy from above. Fryrenda coldly ordered to flog these two, who do not know how to behave. The pirate and the horse thief laughed that they would receive those 20 blows and threatened to take revenge on her as soon as they were driven out of here. Frenda ordered the baton to be handed over to Veronica so that she could deal the blows. Those two screamed in horror. They were in their right mind to let the werewolf beat. Aiden was not so cruel. Frenda told them that no one cares whether they die or live, because first let them think before doing anything. As the two of them were dragged out of the cell, Frenda added that there was no prison doctor, so whether they would survive the punishment or not depended on them. Afterwards, the girl appointed her assistants to be in charge of the sectors, giving them distribution. One of the prisoners wondered, hearing terrible screams, whether Frenda was really that evil. Her neighbor, a powerful lady with muscles who looked like a thug, said that her ears were already hurting. Dolly received news from her furry assistant about the lack of funding. She thought out loud, and the necromancer, without looking up from her reading, said that if she wants, she can run away. When the witch said that she would report her in this case, Arsena replied that if Aiden loses power, she will run away before Dolly. But for now, a contract is a contract. The prisoners were taken out for a walk. One of them kept looking sideways at the exit. Frenda yelled at her not to dare to glare and walked forward. The girl commanded that from now on all prisoners would walk in groups of 10. This is power, Veronica thought. How she can control, and Lord Aiden trusts her with everything. Isabella, who had gone from a supervisor to a superintendent, jumped up to her and said that she would patrol with Veronica. Veronica happily exclaimed that in the future she also wants to grow to such a position to help Lord Aiden. Isabella said that now they need to monitor the food intake of the captives, and later they will be replaced. At that moment, carts with new prisoners arrived. The head of supervision, Haley, shouted to them that why they had sent new ones, there was nowhere to put them. There weren't enough hands. A smiling queen ant sat in the carriage chamber. Hearing it said that there was an official order for her to be transferred to Rosa. She was given a prison uniform and brought to her cell. It was dark, and her neighbor was lying under a blanket. Having asked if she was new, the succubus jumped up and said that this was her 8th trip to Rose because of her love for Lord Aiden. And the guards were like older sisters to her. They had played with her since she was young. She said, with a businesslike and authoritative air, that if the new girl called her big sister, then she would help her in everything. The new girl smiled and obediently agreed to wash her older sister's clothes. At this time, when it was already dark, someone started the fire. The guards alarmed, shouting fire. Panic began. As it turned out, the hostel began to burn. Frenda and the other guards did not immediately understand what to do, and confusion began around. Veronica and Frenda met their eyes when they heard some kind of growl. Demonic creatures in shackles and prison uniforms stood in front of Veronica. 3 creatures rushed at the girl, breaking through the defense of the guards. The guards rushed to run into the scattered space, while Frenda shouted that they needed to hold the line. The prisoner watched this picture from the camera, reasoning that Frenda lacked authority. Superintendent Jenny, who was in the colony, shouted to the guards to run to the dining room. A riot broke out there. The huge girl also calmly said out loud that Rose was about to collapse. Her neighbor said that Frenda's small losses would not lead to global problems. The instigator needed to be found. At this time, Veronica, Frenda, and 2 guards entered into a fight with the rebellious trio. Suddenly, Aiden appeared in the aisle, wishing the ladies good evening. Pistols were pointed at the rioters. Aiden calmly walked forward. Those who rebelled were ordered to immediately return to their cells. Aiden walked along the corridor and said that he had just gone away for a while to drink a cup of tea and think about why the security had quit and such. He asked the prisoners how they dared to attack the prison guards. The bloodsucker grinned and told him that there were not enough guards and he was no longer able to control the prison. Let him admit it already. Aiden turned to her words and said, "Since when did groundhogs become so arrogant?" The vampire, in anger, breaking the bars, shouted that she would kill him and drown him in spit. Aiden replied that she was very convinced of her words, but he would only give them one chance. He came up with a plan, because in order to contain such a number of prisoners, you need the same number of guards. It will not be possible to recruit quickly. And if some of the prisoners are made voluntary guards, he will kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He understood how risky it was, but there was no choice. He ordered Frenda and Veronica to follow him. The cells would be open. The queen ant looked and thought what this guy was up to by opening the cameras because chaos would begin. The succubus watched what was happening with curiosity when Mary asked permission to ask her. She said that she should ask. Then the cellmate, smiling radiantly, asked if she knew a prisoner named Evans, who is also called the Reaper of Dirty Blood. The succubus looked at her suspiciously, asking why she decided to be interested in prisoners, to which Mary, still smiling sweetly, justified that she was simply the #1 killer and there were legends about her, just curious. The succubus said that she already thought that she had decided to choose another mentor, although she would not have succeeded. The succubus said that Evans is a privileged prisoner. For the warden, she is like his own daughter. He teaches her to read and write, visiting her every day. Then she added that she is not jealous at all, given that she and Aiden are an unofficial couple. While the succubus chirped, Mary turned purple with anger. Her Evans was like Aiden's own daughter. She remembered how she showed her daughter people, calling them bad, and those who wanted to kill them, she needed to get rid of them. Her baby then destroyed everyone as they ran to kill the Ant Queen, screaming that she was a heretic. This girl is her ideal creation, the best of all. The girl used magical power to create such a powerful wave that all these little people burned. People were burning alive, and she was proud of her daughter. The girl asked if those people were dead. Everything around was strewn with charred skeletons. Remembering this, she squeezed the succubus so much that she screamed that she wanted to break her or something. Aiden informed Friend of his plan. She understood his intentions to release the prisoners in order to discover the instigator. Aiden told her that tomorrow during the prisoners' lunch they would meet in a secret place. Friend, walking along the corridor with Veronica, whispered to her that Lord Aiden wanted to tell her something, but he was embarrassed. Veronica said that she could handle everything. But Frenda whispered in her ear that after the transformation she tore her pants and needed to take another set. Veronica, with her cheeks burning with shame, saw that she was walking around with a hole in her pants, exposing her butt. The Gorgon stood in complete embarrassment and could not believe her eyes that the cameras had actually been opened. Standing in the prison yard, the prisoners whispered about what Aiden was up to. The prison gates were also open. Who would risk it? Laughing, Isabella with a camera asked who dares. They just need to go out and they are free. The prisoners offered to try the Gorgon, saying she was fearless. Everyone looked, but was afraid to be the first. The Gorgon seemed to want to, but remembered Aiden's hellish punishments and refused. The fear was stronger. She remembered how he held her over the fiery crater and said that he would leave her until the morning, and if she survived in the morning, he would take her. At this time, a chicken jumped out clucking. The cook screamed to catch her as it was their dinner. Isabella tried to catch the bird, but it jumped out and clucked outside the prison gates. Everyone pointed their fingers, and lo and behold, the chicken calmly walked to freedom. The Gorgon joyfully pointed at the chicken and said that since it was nothing, then they definitely shouldn't be afraid. At that moment, a bright fiery pillar of a magic circle rose up, causing everyone to recoil. A second later, the carcass of a charred fried chicken fluttered out, just in time for dinner. Isabella yelled that she didn't set up the magic circle for so long just to have a chicken step on it. At this time, a rioting prisoner grabbed the forest elf, saying that since there was a lot of garbage here, it could be thrown like a gnat of sand to break all the circles of protection. The prisoners watched in horror as the baby asked for help, dangling his little legs. The tiger woman said that there are not many circles here, you just need to rush everyone at once and you don't need to kill anyone. The one holding the elf growled that they were prisoners. Let everyone see what would happen to Aiden's minions. She picked it up and was ready to throw Galala when she was shot. The warden noted that prisoners who did not want to escape should not be involved in this. The second added that they are still prisoners, so let them watch their words and think what they do. One of the guards announced that those who do not want to escape will return to their cells, and the rest will be treated like cannon fodder. Tigress noticed that it had become much cleaner, and suggested discussing what to do with Aiden. When suddenly she looked in horror at the person who came in, it was her Mrs. Austin. This was the princess of the House of Malbus, ruler of the Beastmen. She ordered the prisoner to stand up since she still disgraced their family by submitting to weaklings. She stated that when the magic circle was no longer needed, she and the others came to have fun. The rest of the rulers noticed that they were leaving, but there was no need to run away. This would lead to war. Let them continue in the same spirit. Mary looked at their seals all over their bodies, thinking about what ancient demon they served. The beast people had their own deity named Malbus. The magic that came from this deity was incredibly strong. She remembered being told that families who received the power of an ancient demon could destroy entire cities. During this time, the cook called for volunteers to help in the kitchen. She stated that some of the staff left because they did not like her food, which really hurt her pride as a cook. Assistants will be allowed to try desserts. While the prisoners began to argue which of them would go, Dolly was ahead of them. With a radiant look, she declared her excellent reputation and golden hands. Arsena looked at this picture and chuckled, saying that she too had found a saint. She added to Dolly that she didn't want to hear anything about desserts. And the girls, who were now crying like a stream, came first. But the witch cut off this dialogue. Frenda approached Arsena and suggested that she temporarily replace the librarian who had quit. Anything was better than sitting in a cell, and all the books would be available, to which she beamed with happiness. She ran so that Dolly managed to see her back and also threw it to her. Look how she changed her shoes. Mary watched them, thinking how small the world is. Since she met this couple here, and with Dolly, everything seems to be completely unimportant, since she is going to cook. While holding a secret meeting, Aiden and his team discussed that all dangerous areas were being monitored by his agents. Prisoners would consider the prison gates a potentially dangerous place. Mary also played her part, studying the map that Anthony gave her. All the prison passages where there are the least guards, calculating the actions of the warden. She figured that the magic circle and the guards were still not able to control everyone. They gave the prisoners conditional freedom of movement, and her Evans belonged to the golden prisoners. Aiden let Evans go, saying that classes were over for the day, and the girl also said goodbye to him. Meanwhile, two of those whom Aiden was waiting for ran. He knew that they would smell barrels of alcohol wherever they were. The thug inhaled the smell emanating from the barrels and asked who they were for, to which the supervisor replied that it was payment for overtime work. Having caught them in a trap, he casually pointed to the prison land, saying that it needed to be cultivated. We need to gather people to plant and grow vegetables for the prison canteen. But he's afraid the prisoners will make a mess, so the guards will have to work overtime. The brute with burning eyes offered her help, because she used to be the leader of the mercenaries. She asked me to leave this work to her. She didn't need the money, but she hadn't drunk good wine for so many years. Aiden deliberately thought about it, and then said that he would give her a chance, and besides, he would save money. At the same time, with a charming smile, he drew her attention to the area. She couldn't do it alone, and time was running out. The astonished girlfriend of the thug stood with the look of someone who had been struck by insight and awareness. Aiden nodded in her direction, saying, "Ask her." She understood what needed to be done. The thug, whose name was Liesel, approached her stunned friend Aya and asked what kind of charades she was playing here. While Aya explained that Aiden wants them to attract other prisoners, but then they will be like white crows and considered servants of the warden, Mary listened to their dialogue. Liesel was called the Butcher. She led a dozen mercenaries who destroyed 1,000 vampire knights. The Ant Queen stroked her daughter's head, admiring Aiden's ingenuity to get out of a difficult situation by bribing prisoners. Then she turned to her daughter, saying that it was not time to wake her up. "Let's wait for the right moment." A shadow of sadness seemed to run across the girl's face. She remembered how they killed. Her mother wants to repeat the past again. When dusk came, Mary took the stone to attract the attention of the guard. Having opened the scar from the stomach, from where purple tentacles could be seen spreading in all directions, the warden told her to leave. There was no one else in this area except them. Mary closed the hole in her stomach and followed the guard. She asked the guard if she had anyone else in mind, to which she replied that she could attract the vampire from cell 56. Meanwhile, the bloody princess angrily threw out her dinner of pig's blood. She was told that this was a punishment for escaping. Let her be glad that she got off with only pig's blood. She screamed and conveyed a message to Idon so that he would not fall asleep at night. Squeezing the bottle of blood, she felt her hand burning and threw the bottle away, the blood spreading. The vampire was burning and smoking from the anger that gripped her at the warden. At that moment, Mary entered the cell and, stepping on the vampire's failed dinner, said that she had come to her on business. In a rage, the Princess of the Blood rushed at the impudent man, declaring how dare a commoner touch her dinner, or she herself wants to become one. The vampire, boiling with rage, looked at this scoundrel, who was not afraid of her at all, and also smiled. Mary replied, "Let him try to bite her, but he will die from his own curse." The bloody princess asked how she knew, then Mary lifted her t-shirt and tentacles appeared from there. She took the vampire by the face and out of surprise she bit Mary's hand, to which she calmly added that everything was fine. She was looking forward to this dinner. After that, she felt her strength begin to recover and the curse did not work. The Ant Queen offered to join her with a smile, noting that she knew how to remove seals from prisoners. Frenda went up to the secret place where Aiden made an appointment for her. She entered the room that the warden had described to her and saw in front of her traps and a warning from Aiden. From the window, it was convenient to watch the prisoners having lunch, and they had no idea that they were being watched. Aiden said that the prisoners had lost their vigilance and they could move on to the next step of the plan. He divided the prisoners into 3 types. This division will help to correctly distribute resources and control prisoners for your benefit and benefit. The first type is the bloodthirsty. Because of their instincts to kill, they cannot be re-educated. These are the main rebels. The second category is those who, for various reasons, had to end up in prison, a striking example of Galal. They are neutral in type. The third category is those who came here because of the external environment. Here they feel more comfortable than in freedom. These are ideal prisoners. The main task is to create a faction and find the boss by pitting prisoners against each other. This will be the opportunity to save Rosa and neutralize the instigators of the riot. The ants crawled to the walls of the prison, sensing their mistress. At this time, the vampire whose seal was removed, tearing out a piece from her chest, splashed her blood. Her bloodthirsty cellmates saw that the seal had been removed and realized that vampires could use blood to make weapons. They, too, could free themselves from the seals and restore their full strength. The bloody princess gathered a team by entering into a deal with Mary. promising to prepare a potion that would remove the seals. Mary, leaving to collect materials for the potion, gave her the order to gather as many people as possible. Tigress and her partner were wary when they learned that this was a new girl. Who she was, they seemed to say that she was a smuggler. Then she decided to show her power of black transformation. The prisoners recoiled in fear. She made a kind of seal to each of them with her tentacles, promising that when they are free they will buy an anti-parasitic potion. But for now, this is her safety net. She also threatened that if anyone revealed her identity or did not comply, he would be killed. The Gorgon watched the worms crawl into her hand and muttered that everything was clear to her. After that, she didn't want to argue. After the meal, the prisoners left the canteen satisfied with the food. They wanted such delicacies to be available every day. The warden stopped the prisoners who were going to their cells, declaring that they were being moved to new ones. This applied to everyone staying in Rosa. Everyone was sent to their own floor in a new cell. Prisoner 2323, a tall girl with a cross-shaped scar on her face, was released early, to which she was surprised to say that her sentence ends next month. The warden said that this was the boss's order, and therefore all questions should be addressed to him. Frenda carried out the order by housing the obedient prisoners. At this time, walking in the prison yard, particularly aggressive prisoners were talking and making an escape plan. Veronica ordered to return to the cells. They began to be indignant that they were given 3 days of free movement. Tigress suggested not to anger the guards and calmly return to the cells. Veronica brought her squad, asking Frenda where to accommodate them. Surprised at how smoothly everything went, Frenda noted that when the rebels behave resignedly, you need to be especially vigilant. The huge pig woman screamed why her cell was occupied, and security immediately headed towards her. They issued an order to change cameras due to bad behavior. The aggressive group immediately flared up. Why should these orders happen? But then the Gorgon stopped them, saying, "Is this bad? Now all like-minded people are nearby and will be able to talk." Mary watched this without taking her eyes off, trying to reveal her superior's plan. Suddenly it dawned on her. She remembered that the cells marked in black from Anthony's plan were used to house the noisiest prisoners, since they were well soundproofed. The Tigress was yelling at someone who wanted to join, but they didn't hear her or heard her only in words. Someone even yelled that they weren't allowing her to sleep properly. The roar of the rioters was loud, so loud that many simply covered their ears as their heads were buzzing. Mary concluded that they decided to make fun of the rebels this way, but in this way Aiden was simply stalling for time. Then she heard someone say that if they continue to feed her like this, then she is ready to live here forever. Others supported her by saying that outside there is only suffering, but here it's like in a sanatorium. The Queen of the Ants shuddered. It means that not everything is so simple. There are a lot of like-minded people here, those who like it here. So Aiden's model was carried out. The prisoners were seated according to classification, where they were happy with the prison. Those who asked others that you really want to stay here are happy with everything. And the red zone with someone who was ready to explode at any minute. And the central chamber stood out in the middle. This chamber was for the prisoners chosen by the Lord. They became Liesel and her friend and advisor Aya, those on whom Aiden bet. Frenda shouted to Liesel if she was busy selecting prisoners for work in the fresh air. The warden was waiting for the list. They were silent, thinking that they had become Aiden's servants and everyone would know about it. But what else could they expect from the boss? Liesel stood and looked at the coveted barrel of wine. Aya, meanwhile, reasoned that Aiden was simply looking for cannon fodder. And the rebels are strong, it's better not to oppose it. The thug asked her friend whether to refuse the warden, but standing in the cell and thinking, her partner replied that the situation had changed. She drew Lucille's attention to the fact that they were in the very center, and around them the prisoners were gathered in a special way, in sectors. These were guys with minor sentences like the giant killer Julie, who, licking her lips, asked to tell where the thug got the alcohol. She smelled it. Or like a werewolf fox Mendy, who is being looked for on the loose. She is a master at seducing men. Having learned about work in the fresh air, the first thing she wondered was whether there would be handsome men there. These prisoners call prison their home. They do not want to be released. Aya thought about how many of them there were, 200 or even more. It turns out that the warden doesn't need cannon fodder. Aiden selected candidates based on mutually beneficial cooperation. The girl saw the whole picture and realized that the warden needed strength to resist the rebels. She blurted out that they were chosen for the role of bosses. Aiden must have studied the matter well, and who would be better suited for this role than the captain of the mercenaries? Liesel seriously replied that the bosses sounded good, but they would still remain the overseer's lackeys, and she recalled how their team was destroyed. They were abandoned by their own people. She sadly said that the owner gets rid of the dog when he doesn't need it. Aya noticed that now everything is different. The boss is on their side and they can attack. The goal of the rebels is to escape and not to fight with them. She noticed that there is a benefit if they can convince the others. Besides, it's nice to call Lissel the boss, isn't it great? Before Lissel had time to mutter that there was work for drinking, the voices of those wishing to do so were heard, and the succubus lit up with happiness, asking not to forget her. Mary was dissatisfied with how a small indulgence could overcome the desire to escape. She was thinking about how to win over these new bosses, and she needed the support of Dolly, who at that moment, watching the thug and her friend, grinned that they would be turned into trash. She remembered how Dolly kicked her out of the coven, hit her, and said that she would no longer be her mentor. Expulsion from the coven, a community of witches, meant loneliness, and she was charged with violating the rules. Mary had already begun testing experiments on people. She made excuses that these were a couple of beggars. No one would even know. Dolly then menacingly told her with contempt that she had not even repented of her sins. Master Lamia was chasing her, and she had to cross the border and get into the forbidden area. But the anger of the chief master of Lamia was so strong that it seemed that she would tear her apart on the spot. The Forbidden Zone is the most dangerous place where almost no one survives, even with superpowers. She thought how Dolly's teacher would be surprised that she not only survived the Forbidden Zone, but also mastered the secret technique and created Evans. Even the Great Four Witches will kneel before her. Aiden gave the released prisoner her personal belongings and congratulated her on her release. He asked her name and what she did. The girl replied that her name was Carol and she was a bounty hunter. He wished her good luck in her freedom and to control herself, to which Carol asked in surprise if it was true that she was being released. She beat up a security guard who called her a punt after making fun of her bust. The girl said that during her year of stay, she only saw how prisoners were executed, but did not see how anyone was released early. Aiden needed something from her. He put money in front of her and asked her to tell her more about her profession. Mary came to the dining room hearing the lists of Lissel's names being passed around. The girls said that if they could still drink, then this was not a prison, but a paradise. Mary went to Dolly, who was having lunch alone, and said that she and her mistress had not seen each other for a long time. Dolly looked at her distantly and silently without reacting. Then she smiled and said that she didn't recognize it right away, but she heard that she had become a mother and was all about worries. Mary was irritated by such a mockery, she said, since she knows about her daughter. Then the goal should be clear. At her offer to help, Dolly grinned, saying why she decided that she wanted to run away. She was generally having a good time. Mary told her that the position of a lapdog was not something a witch like her could dream of, and he didn't give her the best job. Dolly did not deny it and noticed that her former student was quite observant. Mary, realizing that the witch trusted few people, decided to prove her sincerity to her by releasing her tentacles. At this moment, a satisfied Aiden received a list of people willing to work. 202 prisoners were found, which is quite enough. He voiced a plan to grow potatoes. They will go to the canteen for food, and you can also learn to distill alcohol from them. Liesel was very inspired by the idea of distilling alcohol. She asked and said that she would control everything, but what they subsequently heard from Aiden left them speechless. He decided to send them to the market for potatoes since everyone was busy and there was no one to buy them. He gathered a team from Galala to help them. As a forest elf, she was well versed in varieties. The werewolf fox Mendy and the giantess Julie. They, with signs and some in shackles, did not believe their eyes that they were just going to the market like that. The guard Isabel warned them that they needed to return early so that the magic circle would not cripple them. Meanwhile, Mary demonstrated to her teacher what she had learned in the Forbidden Zone, namely the art of prosperity. Everything she touches will grow at an extraordinary rate. She gave the example of a chicken that became a chicken in a few seconds. She said that if you try this on a magic circle, it will begin to expand and collapse. Mary said that she knows about the contract with Aiden. If it is broken, death occurs. But thanks to the ritual of prosperity, the problem can be solved. With the help of enhanced growth, the object reaches a critical point and separates. This way, Dolly will have a new body and be able to resist the curse. Having completed the demonstration of the experiment with the split chicken, she triumphantly asked whether the lady would be satisfied with such a result. Dolly grimaced with a grin and ordered to leave the dining room immediately. Then she would pretend that nothing had happened. At first, Mary was taken aback, but then she laughed evilly, saying that it was her big mistake. She wants Mary and Aiden to fight with each other and interrupt. Why? Isn't it easier to cooperate? At this, Dolly laughed, saying that before her former student was not so smart. An aggressive group of people entered the dining room where the prisoners were having lunch and decided to start a riot. Before those who were dining had time to ask them anything, they attacked those sitting. They attacked Aiden's servants, tearing them to blood. Mary once again invited the teacher to think about her proposal or not to interfere. Passers-by turned around at the group of prisoners walking through the market. The girls felt squeezed except for Mendy, who made eyes at all the passing men. Carol and her group spied on this bunch, fulfilling Aiden's task. Aiden paid her bail and asked her to follow this group at the market. During an attempt to escape, the warden gave the order to kill on the spot. The girls looked doubtfully at the slums that they passed, asking Galala if they were going the right way. There were no potatoes to be seen here, to which the elf assured them that her instincts would not let them down. The further they walked, the more they felt the seal on their neck begin to weaken. Mendy was the first to speak out loud. Aya became very worried, especially when Mendy blithely clarified that they were going to leave the magic circle. Jilala threw the sign off her chest and asked the others if they were really idiots or pretending. It was better to go further away and plan an escape. Friend and Aiden were discussing whether Galala should decide to escape. The warden noticed that she had not visited Evans for several days. He noted that if Galala was a child, then nothing strange. But given that she is 170 years old and more experienced than everyone else, it seems that she decided to run away. Meanwhile, when the others looked at the elf disapprovingly, she reminded them that she lives in constant fear. Because of her appearance, she is the first to be dealt with, and she is tired of humiliation. She remembered the last time she was almost killed by rioting prisoners. She stated that they were healthy people who knew how to defend themselves and had no right to judge her. The elf suggested using the 10 escape coins that Aiden gave to buy potatoes. Mendy was the first to respond, saying that the seal had weakened significantly and the time was really right. Besides, she had a lot of lovers who could shelter them. But as she noted, you need to make your way through the forest carefully since she has cuckolded many witches, so she has many enemies. Aya and Liesel decided to stay away from this couple. After Mendy, Liesel started making eyes at her with an offer to have dinner. When Aya interrupted the skirmish and said that all this was strange. Why would Aiden send them alone, really? There weren't a couple of workers, and besides, he allowed them to get to the edge of the magic circle. At that moment, Galala felt vibrations of tension, surveillance. Dozens of eyes were watching them. She burst into tears that she had chosen the wrong path, and they needed to go get potatoes. Aya also felt an extraordinary tension. From the very beginning, it was a trap. He gave them the illusion of freedom. They were watched by dozens of Carol's mercenaries ready to shoot at any minute. Carol ordered her people to be quiet. It seemed their presence had begun to be suspected. Feeling that the tension was heating up to the limit, Galala, all in tears from fear, shouted that she needed to go and not make Mr. Aiden wait. Meanwhile, Aiden taught a lesson with Evans, telling him that if you want to tame wolves, make them tame dogs. In order to teach someone fidelity, you need to let them know affection. Evans thoughtfully noted that this means Little Red Riding Hood can tame the wolf and make him her dog, and then he won't eat her grandmother. To which Aiden noted that there is nothing absolute in this world. Everything depends only on ourselves. At that moment, the girl saw pictures of her creation: darkness, mucus, emptiness. A guard rushed into the office, shouting that there was a riot in the dining room and we needed to run away urgently. The warden was taken aback, where the problems could have come from. Something was wrong here. He had missed some detail. Mary enters the dining room and all the prisoners are eating there. Everything should have gone well. Then he sees Dolly in the magic ball. Is she really connected with this even when the bullet was stolen? Someone is controlling the instigators, but we need to find out who is behind them. He gave the order to the guard to watch. In the dining room, there were broken tables, mountains of broken dishes, and prisoners lying in blood. Mary approached Dolly and asked, since she did not intervene, but simply watched, what she would do now. Would she run away with everyone or go beg for Aiden's forgiveness? The witch told her that she remembered her as a little girl, watched her, and told her teacher to watch her, since her mind was visible from childhood. But this mind turned the girl into an arrogant and selfish bitch. And this bitch will stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Mary was clearly disappointed by such an unflattering statement, but replied that Dolly should watch her language. They are now in the same boat. Then she launched her power, which began to draw magical signs in the air, telling Mary who needed it in order to work with her. The Tiger Woman and Gorgon noticed that the conversation was not going according to plan, but decided not to interfere, since they knew that since Dolly was collaborating with Aiden, she retained some of the power. Mary was frightened when she saw such power, saying that only she could break her contract. Dolly laughed in response and stated that she also descended into the Forbidden Lands and mastered all these techniques. Dolly looked for her former student in the Forbidden Lands. Although she did not find her, she learned the splitting techniques, the same as Mary. It allows you to split the body, soul, and even the lifespan of a creature in half. The witch added that her former student forgot to mention one detail of this technique. The creature's mind suffers. They turn into mentally retarded, crippled clones. After that, she threw Mary away with all her strength. At that moment, the succubus grabbed her hand and dragged her along, saying that she needed to run. Mary stood in a daze, seeing not a succubus, but a deity with a knife, who told her to close her eyes and soon it would all be over. At that moment, the succubus collapsed with her on the floor, seeing a rat that jumped on her leg. At this moment, the harpy attacked with all her anger and aggression. The succubus fell, covering her face with her hands. She was scratched until she bled. She tried to cover her face with her hands. Then the harpy grabbed Mary's hand with her clawed paw, and she screamed in piercing pain. She thought that she should stop now, but the instinct to kill overshadowed her mind. She no longer cared about the punishment and consequences. She attacked Mary and the succubus with even greater fury. She flew to the other end of the dining room, looking around angrily. At that moment, she felt someone's gaze. Dolly sat at the table as if nothing had happened and waved her hand with mocking mockery. Frenda ran ahead of the guards with orders for all prisoners to return to their cells. The Gorgon shouted that the guards were approaching and they needed to retreat. But the harpy and some of her minions said that they were tired of retreating. They united and moved with a determined attitude to break the guards. But their ardor died down when they noticed that this time there were 10 times more security. Aiden gave the order to find out the one who commands the rebels, and he takes care of the rest. Frenda announced that the riot had been suppressed. The wounded needed to be helped, and told the group of instigators that they were left to their own devices. They were taken aback by surprise. Meanwhile, when the others looked at the elf disapprovingly, she reminded them that she lives in constant fear. Because of her appearance, she is the first to be dealt with, and she is tired of humiliation. She remembered the last time she was almost killed by rioting prisoners. She stated that they were healthy people who knew how to defend themselves and had no right to judge her. The elf suggested using the 10 escape coins that Aiden gave to buy potatoes. Mendy was the first to respond, saying that the seal had weakened significantly and the time was really right. Besides, she had a lot of lovers who could shelter them. But as she noted, you need to make your way through the forest carefully, since she has cuckolded many witches, so she has many enemies. Aya and Liesel decided to stay away from this couple. After Mendy, Liesel started making eyes at her with an offer to have dinner, when Aya interrupted the skirmish and said that all this was strange. Why would Aiden send them alone, really? There weren't a couple of workers, and besides, he allowed them to get to the edge of the magic circle. At that moment, Galala felt vibrations of tension, surveillance. Dozens of eyes were watching them. She burst into tears that she had chosen the wrong path and they needed to go get potatoes. Aya also felt an extraordinary tension. From the very beginning, it was a trap. He gave them the illusion of freedom. They were watched by dozens of Carol's mercenaries, ready to shoot at any minute. Carol ordered her people to be quiet. It seemed their presence had begun to be suspected. Feeling that the tension was heating up to the limit, Galala, all in tears from fear, shouted that she needed to go and not make Mr. Aiden wait. Meanwhile, Aiden taught a lesson with Evans, telling him that if you want to tame wolves, make them tame dogs. In order to teach someone fidelity, you need to let them know affection. Evans thoughtfully noted that this means Little Red Riding Hood can tame the wolf and make him her dog, and then he won't eat her grandmother. To which Aiden noted that there is nothing absolute in this world. Everything depends only on ourselves. At that moment, the girl saw pictures of her creation. Darkness, mucus, emptiness. A guard rushed into the office, shouting that there was a riot in the dining room and we needed to run away urgently. The warden was taken aback. Where the problems could have come from, something was wrong here. He had missed some detail. Mary enters the dining room and all the prisoners are eating there. Everything should have gone well. Then, he sees Dolly in the magic ball. Is she really connected with this even when the bullet was stolen? Someone is controlling the instigators, but we need to find out who is behind them. He gave the order to the guard to watch. In the dining room, there were broken tables, mountains of broken dishes, and prisoners lying in blood. Mary approached Dolly and asked, since she did not intervene but simply watched, what she would do now. Would she run away with everyone or go beg for Aiden's forgiveness? The witch told her that she remembered her as a little girl, watched her, and told her teacher to watch her, since her mind was visible from childhood. But this mind turned the girl into an arrogant and selfish bitch. and this bitch will stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Mary was clearly disappointed by such an unflattering statement, but replied that Dolly should watch her language. They are now in the same boat. Then she launched her power, which began to draw machine signs into the air, telling Mary who needed it in order to work with her. The Tiger Woman and the Gorgon noticed that the conversation was not going according to plan, but decided not to interfere, since they knew that since Dolly was collaborating with Aiden, she retained part of the Chila. Mary was frightened when she saw such power, saying that only she could break her contract. Dolly laughed in response and stated that she also descended into the Forbidden Lands and mastered all these techniques. Dolly distorted her former student in the Forbidden Lands. Although she did not find her, she learned the splitting techniques the same as Mary. It allows you to split the body, soul, and even the lifespan of a creature in half. The witch added that her former student forgot to mention one detail of this technique: the creature's mind suffers. They turn into mentally retarded, crippled clones. After that, she threw Mary away with all her strength. At that moment, the succubus grabbed her hand and dragged her along, saying that she needed to run. Mary stood in a daze, seeing not a succubus but a deity with a knife, who told her to close her eyes and soon it would all be over. At that moment, the succubus collapsed with her to the floor, seeing a rat that had jumped. Frenda added that free movement does not apply to those who take part in the potato planting project. Mendy happily clapped her hands, and the boar, which was being twisted by the guards, growled that Aiden was just a real villain. Aya became very scared because she realized that Aiden had deliberately created the situation by allowing the prisoners to be released, and then lock them up again. The spirit of the prisoners was seriously damaged, but Aiden has guards, a magic circle, and 200 prisoner henchmen. She realized that no matter what plans the rebels made, in this situation, they were unrealizable. The succubus happily clapped Mary on the shoulder that they were now labor prisoners too. Siri smiled sweetly, saying it was good that the aggressive prisoners were locked up, and I thought to myself that there would be more food in the dining room, and what the warden would say when his faithful dogs obeyed her. Her plan was to subdue Aiden's minions through insect larvae. Aiden and Frenda walked along the corridor. They understood that it was too early to relax, and the aggressive rebels would not have the mind to start a riot themselves. Someone was controlling them. Frenda reported to him that the guard in the dining room said that the new prisoner was constantly communicating with Dolly. Aiden called Mary in for questioning. She innocently replied that she started talking to Dolly because she was curious why she didn't wear a uniform like everyone else. During the interrogation with Dolly, he asked why she didn't stop the riot. She assured the boss that she herself barely escaped. There was too much rebellion. Frenda interrogated about the attack on the new girl, Dolly, with an air of innocent simplicity, assured that she used only a drop of magic to intimidate the new girl and have influence over her. Aiden checked the lists of new workers who joined them: former smugglers, robbers, scammers. Frenda was horrified by the reality that, due to mass layoffs, new staff were hired indiscriminately. This means that many of them can cooperate with prisoners. Aiden thought it was possible that someone was taking advantage of the prison's labor shortage to cause a commotion. He did not trust Dolly, knowing that she was still a pretender. If not for the contract spell, which she was afraid of, she would have revealed herself long ago. The warden gave the order to send guards to look after the prisoners, one person for each, and for Veronica to use her scent to find and destroy all the witch's creations. The next day, planting work began. Mir was outraged that the convoy couldn't take his eyes off her. It was annoying. She replied that she was watching her in the dining room, and if it weren't for the cast spell, the new girl would have been hanging on the gallows. Mary snapped irritably that if Aiden understood, it would all be over for both of them. She replied that if there were no progress in the coming days, then the documents would lie on Aiden's desk, to which Mary said that if she had been delivered the necessary ingredients, she would have arranged everything long ago. Yalala actively commanded the working prisoners and stopped any conversation. She herself was about to drink a cup when she heard a familiar voice asking her to sit down next to her. In surprise, when she saw Evans emerging from the shadows, she choked on her tea. Evans asked permission to read books to her on the advice of Mr. Aiden, so she could make friends. And since Galala is a child, she would like to start with her. Galala noted that the 170-year-old child, Evans, still calmly and distantly began to read Snow White aloud. Seeing a book with strange pictures, the elf was surprised because she had never seen anything like this in the library before. While crushing another mouse, Veronica looked at Evans with resentment and asked the chief guard why it was so unfair, for what merit she got all the benefits. The girl said that Evans had a difficult situation and answered with a question whether Veronica thought the killer or his weapon should be in prison. Veronica quickly answered that of course she was a murderer. What was the point of holding a weapon? Then the guard, pointing to the girl, said that she was the murderer's weapon, sentenced to life imprisonment. She was created by the crazy ant queen May Lucina, and according to rumors, she catches orphans and performs crazy modifications on their bodies. She continued to tell how Evans was brought in. The doctor was horrified. All the girls' insides were torn apart. They were intertwined with various devices and various weapons. Instead of blood, a strange caustic substance flows in the girl. It melts the scalpel, and it is impossible to cure her in these conditions. God only knows how much pain she endured before getting here. She is 13 years old. She should be under the care of a loving family. But now she looks more like a mechanism than a living person. Veronica looked at the girl with sympathy. Is it really impossible to help her? The warden said that there is an Imperial Dragon Hospital, but it is very expensive and the city is not ready to pay such bills. At this time, the superintendent was called out that a new batch of prisoners had arrived. More children of the Ant Queen arrived. Their condition was even worse than Evans's. They were like walking zombies. The children looked indifferently in front of them. Their face, neck, and body were protected, with traces of terrible experiments. The prisoners working outside were invited to lunch. Everyone attacked the food except Mendy, who was busy putting on makeup. Gilala stood in the sun, and Liesel said that her food was booze. They joked and laughed merrily at the elf eating the sun's rays. Aya remembered how she and Liesel, going to battle and dreaming of creating their own guild, found an abandoned village with children. They wanted to adopt abandoned children, give them family and care. The plans were to train children in professions and teach them how to earn money. After the battle, the guild was defeated. Only 2 of them remained. There was a knock on the door of a room in an upper-class interracial guest house, and the maid brought food. The girl who opened the door said that she was late and kicked her out the door. She returned to her friends and playing cards, saying that the dish was unusual and the loser would eat it. The parasites controlled by the queen ant began their action in the body by subduing consciousness. The girls who had eaten lunch began to moan in pain, the pain intensifying with each passing minute. Everyone in the dining room became ill. The food was poisoned. Frenda ran into Aiden, shouting that the food was poisoned, and the order was given to send them to the medical room. There was an urgent need to call a doctor in the city. The prison doctor had been lured away long ago. Liesel was very worried about her friend and did not move away from her. She had to be taken to the infirmary. She held her friend's hand when she told Liesel, calling her boss, that she must move on with her life. No matter what happens, people and things are all trifles in the long road of life. Then the girl lost consciousness. Liesel, having lost control, began to scream, trying to bring her to her senses. Aiden calmed her down by saying that it was just food poisoning. There was no need to shout so much. The fact that Aya lost consciousness under the influence of a hallucinogenic drug is evident from the state of her pupils. Aiden told everyone that they would wait for a doctor from the city as long as the patient's vital signs were normal. Aiden and Frenda were discussing who could have smuggled in such a dose of poison. The cook was excluded. She had been working here for several years. Frenda realized that Aiden was hinting at a traitor among the guards, since otherwise the poison could not penetrate Rose's wall. The warden said that the problem is that whoever started this is preparing to take serious steps. All the cells need to be searched. He also ordered the hiring of Superintendent Mo, who studied prisoners' cases and had a photographic memory, as an assistant. The experimental girl spoke through her hand. Since her mouth was protected, she was used by Mary as an intercom through which she spoke with Dolly, saying that last time she went too far and without the help of the main witch, breaking the protective mechanisms would be problematic. Dolly stood silently, and Mary continued to broadcast her plan. With the help of Evans, she would launch an attack, and Dolly needed to kill Aiden. The witch smiled and noted that Mary's original goal was to kill Aiden and how she could talk about something like that so easily. Mary hid behind a tree and decided to take action. Soon, everyone would find out that she was behind the poisoning. Dolly told her that first she needed to go see her old friends, and when the time came, they would meet. Mary gave her teacher an elixir that allowed her to melt the collar and fully restore her strength. She decided to take a couple of these elixirs. The girl opened her life, in which there were bottles like in a refrigerator. Dolly advised the Ant Queen to stay away from her. If the main witch Lamia saw her, she would immediately kill her. At this time, a search began in each cell, and some prisoners were extremely indignant. In the succubus's chamber, Veronica found a strange vibrating pink crystal. The intertent whispered to her that it vibrates under the influence of heat. The succubus was hysterical and asked that her baby be given to her. Veronica honestly communicated to show this thing to Aiden. If he did not pose a threat, then it would be returned to her. The succubus became even more hysterical, begging her not to show it to her boss. Dolly went into the library to see Arsena, calling her a bookworm. She did not appreciate the humor and suggested that she speak to the point. The witch asked Arsena to look at Aiden's soul. Is it the same as before, and is he ready to release them from the contract? Arsena asked if she was in her right mind to ask such a thing. Dolly explained her request. Her furry pets have recently been falling into mousetraps that were placed throughout the prison. You need to understand whether this is a kind of warning from Aiden. Arsena said that the warden served in the Holy Inquisition. He was dipped in holy water at the ceremony, so the only way to penetrate the soul was through his eyes. Dolly noticed that his soul is in the body of the warden or not, but he cannot walk quickly. The witch explained that 2 months ago, for an unknown reason, the warden began to use a cane. His right leg became less mobile, so even if he could not defeat him, he could run away. Arsena reminded him of the agreement, one spell from his lips, and they were corpses, the girl suggested, asking the elf who reads emotions. As she left, Dolly said that soon it would be very noisy here and placed a melting collar in front of the necromancer, and she also promised her friend to provide a secluded place if necessary. Arsena sat silently and did not answer. Veronica innocently showed Aiden a vibrating succubus crystal, asking if this thing was dangerous, to which he lowered his eyes and did not answer. The intertent was clutching her stomach with laughter and gave express training, telling us what this item was used for. Veronica was ready to fall into the ground with shame when she found out everything. She remembered when she said goodbye to her fellow villagers. They said that she was the most suitable age for love and wished her to woo Aiden. Veronica blushed, realizing how inexperienced she was in love affairs. She definitely had no chance. Suddenly, Veronica screamed that she could smell this smell. Everyone looked at her in alarm. While studying at the Equestrian Academy, the teacher showed them a flower and told them to remember this smell of death. He showed a flower that grows from the bones of a corpse. It contains the power of the evil god of the Forbidden Land. It was he who caused trouble 100 years ago, when all races were on the verge of extinction. Veronica, realizing the horror of the situation, rushed to the infirmary to see the patients. She screamed why the prison smelled like a bone flower. This smell came from everywhere. Those who were poisoned were vomiting in the dining room. Aiden was horrified when Veronica informed him that the smell was coming from the prisoner's vomit. He remembered Evans when she was in prison and was unconscious. The doctor said that there was a bone flower in her blood. Only the Queen of Ants could get it. At that moment, Galala ran in screaming and reported that Evans had escaped. She called her mother and simply took off. The elf could not stop her. Aiden shouted that the Ant Queen was here. Everyone should go to the first level of combat readiness. The townspeople stopped at the sound of the prison siren. Talk of a riot could be heard, and the prison siren was turned on only in the most extreme cases of danger. The entire prison and surrounding area was covered with a dome of magical protection. The guards are alarmed. The first level of combat readiness indicates that they are trying to break through the magic circle. One of the daughters of the Ant Queen poured a potion on the lock of the cell, which melted before our eyes. Before the guards had time to shoot at her, Mary herself appeared and said that it was time to start the fun. She began pouring her poison into the cell locks, and the prisoners broke free. Dozens of aggressive creatures sweeping away everything, ready to kill, broke free. The guards rushed into Aiden, shouting that the Queen of the Ants had seized the cells that were free, and that the juvenile delinquent had melted the castle. The innocents were terrified. Panic began. This was a conspiracy. Were these children also her creations? Aiden ordered not to panic. Getting out of prison is not so easy. Everyone must fulfill their tasks. The chief internets, Helly and Jenny, were given orders to go to the cells. You can shoot, but not attack. Frenda and her assistant were supposed to go to the lobby. You need to understand the mechanism of the protective circle. It needs to be configured. Isabella was assigned the task of being in charge of logistics and providing the center with the necessary power. Veronica was supposed to guard the center of the prison and ensure the safety of Frenda and Mo. According to the regulations, after the alarm signal, the army of the Silver City should arrive within 15 minutes, but Aiden realized that he should not expect help. Anthony thought of everything. Then Aiden took a flare from his desk drawer and lit it. The bounty hunter Carol left her when she left after the last task. If any trouble arises, she will know and will immediately arrive with help. She heard the fireworks call at the wrong time and cursed while in the ladies' room. The danger is that she herself can take advantage of the chaos that is happening, Aiden thought, holding the notebook in his hands. Frenda clarified with the warden that this could indeed be used as a weapon. She would not have done this if she had not been sure what trump card Anthony had. When they left, Anthony gave Frenda that very notebook and winked that before entering the center, she should pay attention to the note. The mouse at that moment was Dolly's eyes. Frenda groaned. wanting to clarify, but Aiden said to remain silent. No one should know about this. The witch was haunted by what note she was talking about. What kind of trump card the warden was hiding. She needed to find out everything carefully before quarreling with him. When the succubus found out who her little sister was from her cell, she wrapped herself in a blanket and screamed at the top of her voice so that she wouldn't kill her. Mary thanked her for being kind to her and interceding, offered to go with her and guaranteed protection. The succubus tremblingly stammered that she only had a year left in prison. The Queen of the Ants thoughtfully noted that the succubus was one of the few who protected and looked after her. So if fate wishes, they will meet again. The succubus, still frightened, but no longer trembling in feverish fear, looked at Mary and their gazes met. When she saw Mary tearing the locks and collars off the prisoners, she wondered if Aiden could handle them. Test subject Mary used tentacles to connect to the bodies of prisoners. They noted that the strength seems to be restored, but it feels like it's not completely restored. They directed the flow of their forces at the gate. When they realized that they were too strong, they decided to try to demolish the walls. The Ant Queen ordered them to move out of the way and began to attack the obstacles herself. She almost managed to break through the gate. Everyone was screaming with impatience. One of the main interns showed the keys and said that in every prison there are rules. Preventing riots is equated to a feat. In Rosa, the same rule also applies. The term will be reduced. Lissel said that she doesn't care about the term. She wants to smear these degenerates who poisoned Aya. The Ant Queen tried to break through the gate barrier. The prisoners rushed about impatiently. The gates opened a little, but did not give in completely yet. Tiger Woman asked about the other prisoners who were still locked in their cells. Shouldn't they be released? Mary answered why they need this garbage. But she protested. Because you can't throw living people like some kind of garbage. Then Mary gave them a potion and said that it could not only melt locks, but also heal wounds. They should drink it if they encounter something unexpected. At that second, there was a deafening explosion and the gates were broken open. The prisoners broke free screaming. Frenda and some of the guards were in a special room watching the prisoners run out. Aiden's deputy ordered them to stick to the main plan. Special sirens lit up on the walls, and combat robots began to line up. A giant-sized lion familiar appeared, approaching with a wild roar to stop the rioters. Dozens of guards with weapons, a lion and combat robots rushed at the prisoners who jumped out. The guards used freeze rays that paralyzed those they hit. Veronica asked why the magic circle was not activated. Because prisoners can use magic, to which the girl was asked to join the battle. Lisa was stretching her muscles. She was ready to beat up those she didn't like. The shackles were removed from her. Mendy tried to calm her down. When Liesel and her guards rushed into battle, she managed to ask about the prison guards, who was in charge, and they reassured her that there were people there. Carol arrived, noticing a bunch of mousetraps, and grinningly made a joke about a large number of rats, to which Aiden suggested getting down to business. The bounty hunter's proposal was to station her men outside the prison to prevent the prisoners from escaping to the Silver City, paying 1,000 gold. In addition, she can offer elite warriors to fight prisoners, and they can also be used as prison guards at a cost of 100 gold per person, which is how much he plans to hire. Aiden, writing a check, stated that he was hiring everyone. Carol smiled contentedly and said that she didn't doubt him, but she knew that funding for the prison had been severely cut. Aiden interrupted her and said that it was none of her business, handed her a check, and told her that he had a special task for her personally. The girl was excited about the opportunity to earn money. Having taken a break from the first round of the battle, Lissa was surprised why the escaped prisoners did not have a leader. She realized that she was surrounded. She used the art of fire. A huge pillar of fire burst out from her back. The enemies needed to grab her because she was strong, and her strength was developing every minute. A volcano of the ancient power of the gods began to rise from the depths, which, as it absorbed, erased the mind. The last thing Liesel thought was that it was good to be alone. Her body began to emit discharges of powerful energy. She began to lose control of her consciousness, but was glad that none of her friends were nearby, and she didn't have to worry about hurting anyone. Seeing the power flaring up from her, the prisoners were amazed where the magical power came from in her. She was simply a master of martial arts. The Queen of Ants said that Liesel personally destroyed 1,000 vampire knights. They could not cope with her. Liesel, sparkling with the power of ancient magic, approached the Queen of the Ants and said that she knew who she was. She smiled and nodded affirmatively, saying that of course she had heard about her heroic feat. The sky was cut by lightning. Vampires rushed forward one after another, but no one returned alive. But even with all this, she is no match for her daughter Aiden, whose powers have not yet been fully developed. They heard a hiss and a huge snake burst out of the circle and grabbed Liesel. Dali controlled the form of the serpent, and Liesel shouted that she was also one of the rebels. The brute fell into a circle from which she could not free herself. A huge, magical force held her back. Liesel screamed at the top of her lungs, activating the power of her powers. Witch Dali, looking at the amazed rebels, said that on Liesel's body there is a magical sign indicating that she belongs to the descendant of an ancient god. The more wounded she is, the more her strength increases. Now she is captured by the spell, so there is no need to be afraid and move on. At that moment, Galal flew out of the circle of spells, shouting that she did not see Aiden's emotions. One of the prisoners still behind bars called her a liar. The prisoners, looking warily at Liesel screaming in the circle, began to move on. At that moment, the thug clearly saw the children from that abandoned village. They were so happy when they learned that they would all be taken away when the vampires were destroyed. Liesel said that she always keeps her word and she will definitely come back for them. When she and Aya went to find out about the children, they were told that they were all adopted by some woman. And now, seeing the exhausted girl who looked like a zombie, whom the Queen of the Ants called her daughter, I realized that this was the same girl who had been waiting for so long. Liesel screamed, so she adopted these children and used them as an experiment. To which Mary just grinned. Prisoners in the central zone fought against robotic fighting machines. There were guards at the door, and many of the rioters were torn to pieces by the lion familiar. One of the prisoners approached the queen and asking her to do something. Dali began to cast a spell by summoning her falcon familiar. The huge bird rushed to smash the combat vehicles like they were toy soldiers. The lion also began to disappear. Dali explained that this was dispelling magic. It's not for nothing that she is the main witch and her main direction is summoning creatures. The guards noticed that if the witch had been on their side, they would definitely have been able to win. Behind them, Mendy timidly remarked what they should do now. Frenda, watching from a special room, ordered to retreat according to the instructions and hurried to find out why the prisoners could use magic. The Iterant responsible for setting up the magic circle said that the circle's indicators are normal. The prisoners' magic comes from outside. Their opponent is the Ant Queen. This is her work. She increased the mechanical strength of the rebels. It was decided to reboot the magic circle and bring energy stones. The prisoners, seeing that the guards had retreated, began to run towards the exit. Only the Princess of the Blood was not feeling well, complaining of lack of sleep and headaches in the last few days. Dali asked Mary why she didn't remove the collars from the others, to which she replied that her potion alone was not enough. She injected stimulants into their brains to activate magical powers, but if the stimulants were not removed from such stress, their brains would collapse. Dali grinned and noticed that her former student was using all the same methods. The guards, meanwhile, hid in the bunker and fired from holes in the walls. Mary replied that she knew what to do. There were 3 passages in this one, and there were now less than 100 guards. She suggested using their numerical advantage to split into 3 groups to destroy the guards, and then everyone meet at the main entrance. Dali agreed with this. But she noticed that she would not be able to help all 3 groups if something happened, since special mechanisms were installed here. Mary reassured her by assuring her that her employer needed Aiden alive, and not the prisoners. Then she ordered Evans to clear the way, and the girl obediently began to act. The girl walked forward. Arrows, bullets, spears stuck into her. She was burning. The prisoner standing next to Mir screamed that the girl was wounded. Mary calmly ordered to just watch what happens next. Killer number 1 is capable of much more. The girl covered in bullets simply absorbed them. The dress tore and 2 revolvers came out of her shoulder blades, which she took in her hands and, like an experienced machine, began to shoot. Having absorbed the bullets, Evans began firing at the guards with them. Mary looked at her creation with pride. The Ant Queen ordered to move forward. The guards began to retreat under the firepower. Someone was approaching. Liesel shouted that whoever it was, let him hit her so that she could break out of these shackles. The succubus slapped her in the face. The thug asked her that she hadn't eaten enough porridge. She should at least stab her with a knife. At this time, they heard someone rapidly approaching them. They were quickly attacked by one of the bloodthirsty rebels. Liesel and the succubus froze without saying anything. They were simply waiting for the next step. The townspeople stopped and looked at the sky, seeing thunderclaps, not understanding what would happen to the weather if there was thunder on a sunny day. Aiden met Arsena and asked why she was not in the library, to which she replied that, given what was happening, it was unlikely that anyone would come for a book. Aiden invited her to take refuge in his office, then looked at her and asked if she had come to challenge him. Arsena replied that she would not dare. Arsena said that today many people will die, and Mr. Aiden himself might die. Would he like to leave his soul for her safekeeping? The Tiger Woman and her partner went down to the punishment cell calling for Katrina, Anna, and Ella, who were locked somewhere here. Suddenly, they heard a cry for help from below. Someone was locked in the room below the punishment cell. They climbed up after the hatch was opened for them, saying that the monsters in the lower compartments were constantly fighting. Their heads were already spinning. The Harpy said that she had lost contact with the main group while saving and how they could all get out of here now. One of them suggested releasing the Wendigo, a creature locked in a cage, so that it would clear the way for them. Everyone stood in silence. This creature did not know how it would behave. Cat noticed that isn't the Wendigo locked here on business, the pirate added. That there are rumors that evil deities are sitting in this creature, the third said. What if it kills them too? Don't worry, the initiator of the proposal replied. We have a good relationship with this creature. Soon they will see how it defeats the prison guards. The interns, observing these steps, sadly noted that they themselves were creating their accomplices. One of the prisoners saw the girls and was a little scared, but the tigress said that there were only 2 of them and she would deal with them. The tigress had an animal instinct for the upcoming danger. She bared her teeth predatorily. Having started to attack the guards, she saw the rays emanating from them. Her ardor cooled down and she offered to surrender. Fear and danger paralyzed the predator's instinct to attack. The boar rushed at full speed at the girls, who with their weapons turned the attacker into mincemeat. Blood spread across the walls. Everyone was amazed at this outcome of the case. Tigress said that they needed to save their asses. Some of them were already unsure that the Wendigo would be able to defeat the guards, as one showed the prisoners a whole bag with the Queen Ant's potion, offering to feed it to the Wendigo. After arguing a little about how much should be fed to this creature for it to have an effect, we decided to give everything we had. The creature began to increase in size incredibly quickly. The prisoners looked in horror as the monster began to transform. An incredible roar and explosion began. The Wendigo changed shape and turned into a monster that moved chaotically towards the group. Liesel remembers her battle, images flashing in fragments in her head. She stands on the field. There are dead opponents all around. She managed to defeat them all. A comrade in arms shouts to her that more enemies are coming. There are a huge number of them, but there will be no reinforcements. They were abandoned. They were just bait. The blood-sucking queen and her army rushed to attack her alone. There was a strong battle. So many bodies, she and the queen were opposite each other. There was an army behind the queen. This gave Liesel anger and fury. She lit up with magical seals and the explosion sent the succubus flying to the side. The descendant of the ancient god screamed. The chains of the circle in which she was imprisoned began to break. The succubus flew away and landed painfully on the hard floor. But what she saw next was an immensely sized monster with a multi-ton mass moving towards them. Liesel screamed for it to die. The succubus, rolling her eyes, did not understand where she was and what was happening. She was picked up by the strong arms of Camilla, who said that she needed to leave. It was very dangerous here. She pulled the succubus, who screamed that her shorts were caught, to which she replied, "It's good that at least they are there." The succubus began to become hysterical. She screamed for Camilla to help Aiden. Camilla exhaled and tried to calm her down, saying that she just saw a nightmare, but she insisted on her own. Sobbing, she told of a vision where Aiden lay defeated by the prisoners and died, and all 80 prisoners decided to rape him. This is an atrocity, Camilla stated, whether she wanted to say that she herself was not among the prisoners, to which the succubus replied that if she had been, it would not have been an atrocity. Camilla noticed that they themselves now need help. When the descendant of the ancient god is going crazy, he does not distinguish friends from enemies. Liesel had already turned into a deity. Having lost her human face, she called on the converted Wendigo to attack. Waves of fire flew by. Those prisoners who were still in their cells asked for help. Their things caught fire. Those who were able to move fled. Camilla carried the succubus under her arm. At this time, Evans fought with combat robots as a machine herself. The fugitives, saying that everything was going swimmingly here, jumped out to freedom, running through obstacles. Mary asked Dally. She had always wondered why witches couldn't modify others. Looking at Evans, she added that it was possible to create an entire army like her and take over the continent. Dolly replied that other witches are no more stupid than her. She wanted to add something else but changed her mind. Then Mary seriously said that since she had taken this path, she should not consider herself part of the coven and forbade mentioning her name and the name of the teacher. Mary replied that those who do not know how to adapt will sooner or later be eliminated. If she did not know about the strength of their teacher, she would not stand on ceremony with her. The guards, along with Mendy, ran into the room, checking if everything was in place and if there were any wounded. Veronica, dumbfounded, asked Mendy why she was here. Had the rebels made their way into this part? Mendy answered breathlessly that Evans and Dali had joined the rebels, and they could not be defeated. The girls asked what to do next. One of the guards said that they needed to join a support group since the entrance to the prison cells had been lost. Veronica asked about the army, why they haven't arrived yet. At this time, the army was sitting in the restaurant. Anthony was feeding and drinking them, paying for everyone. One of the soldiers said that it was wrong that they had been here for so long, but Anthony assured that Lord Aiden would handle everything himself. It's just a show with all the sirens going off to quell a non-existent riot and teach the prisoners a lesson why ruin the warden's plan. Then Anthony saw that a cart with energy stones was leaving, ordered from Rosa prison. He tried to dissuade us from going, because there was a riot in the prison, but the delivery man said that the order definitely needed to be delivered. This was the third phase. Anthony was shocked. He didn't know anything about this. Funding for the prison had been cut. Where did the warden get the money from? Carol heard all this in tension, posing as an ordinary visitor. Aiden was still sitting with Arsena, who saw that the gate had been broken through and asked why he wasn't doing anything. The warden said thoughtfully that rebellion is not an easy thing. It is necessary to check whether the exercises were of any use. But inside, he was panicking. The gates had been broken through. Everything was going faster than they expected. If they couldn't stop the rioters in the center, then there would be failure. But he continued to pretend to be careless. He was now under guard. If he showed excitement, he would be discovered. He could only hope that there would be no more mistakes, he thought. Dolly listened as the prisoners boasted about how they broke into the center. Aiden was stupid and couldn't do anything. Dolly tried to figure out what was behind Aiden's confidence. If he had the same strength, he would hardly have stood aside. At this time, the mouse showed the trap set. Dolly thought that this was definitely intended for her. Rats made their way to the prison in hordes. The guards screamed in horror where there were so many of them. The gate was broken. There was no warden. The guards asked who knew how to command. They needed a plan of action. Mendy offered herself. She stated that she had previously commanded an army and began giving instructions. Under Mendy's command, fire began, and some of the prisoners rushing forward were thrown back. The Gorgon said that the concentration in the security center is 90%, but she doesn't smell Aiden. The Ant Queen smiled at the fact that Aiden was now helpless. She added that it was time for her ants to hunt and activated the patients in the infirmary, whom she controlled through insects. The patients began to rise and, like zombies, go to the call of the mistress. Now no one would consider the dying patient a threat. Aya, who no longer belonged to herself, stood up with everyone. Mary, grinning, said that the infirmary was their biggest mistake. They didn't take it into account at all. Veronica smelled a corpse. She immediately realized that something was happening in the infirmary. The zombies controlled by Mary almost took out the door. Veronica shouted that they were approaching. The guards did not understand who she meant. When they were alone with Frenda, she entrusted the girl with a special mission. If the unexpected happened, Veronica needed to come to Aiden's aid. Frenda shared with her that 2 months ago he lost his memory and turned into an ordinary person. Frenda also added that this was kept secret, since few people can be trusted in prison. Frenda also wasn't entirely sure whether the inner Tants would be able to carry out their duties during the chaos. She reminded Veronica of the original reason for going to prison. Veronica remembered the day when Aiden saved her from her enemy. He stood and looked into the distance. Veronica then walked in his cloak and sobbed. She was so grateful to this man. Taking off from her seat, the girl ran with all her available strength. She understood that the door of the infirmary was next to Aiden's office. Frenda saw this through the control in the bunker and ordered the side door to be opened and Veronica to be led into the infirmary. The door was broken down. The patients were about to escape from the infirmary. Veronica, transforming, rushed at the rushing crowd. The zombies rushed at her in a crowd, ready to tear her apart. They were no longer human. Veronica sealed the first one that rushed at her, realizing that only she could hold them back now. Mary's controlled puppets were also unusually strong. One hit Veronica with all her might. The guard shouted to Mendy that this was certain death. Mendy made excuses that she was in command in the fight against bandits and not against prisoners. Mendy actually watched the men commanding the detachment. Her main task was flirting and seduction. The guard yelled at her that prisoners and bandits were not the same thing, shaking her and demanding that she do something before it was too late. And then it dawned on Mendy that she could use her charms and see how they would fall on women. The guards began to run away. The prisoners shouted after them, what good were they if they ran away like rats? Mary ordered the immediate destruction of the opponents before they gathered their thoughts. Mendy, reincarnated, used a fox spell causing passion and charm. A flow of fluids in huge quantities enveloped the room. Everyone found themselves in a fog. When the prisoners realized that the fog was not poisonous, they thought it was just a trick. But within a minute, the women began to vomit. The unbearable smell made them vomit. Mendy said that this is her ability and her kind. She releases pheromones in huge quantities, making puppets out of men with the help of sexual desire. Well, for those who are not interested in women, the smell is simply unbearable, but her strength will not be enough. There are too many opponents. The guards noticed that no wonder there was no one here who might like women. But some women did not feel sick. It began to dawn on everyone that they sympathized with their sex. The Gorgon lit up with the fire of love. Everyone screamed that she liked women. Mendy was delighted. Now she can use this puppet for her own purposes. The Gorgon tried to resist the aroma, but it became more and more intense. And now she is already dancing with Mendy, who announces that this is their wedding dance. The Gorgon blushed with embarrassment. She didn't understand whether it was a dream or reality, but she was so enveloping, this aroma of love. Then she spat on everything, even the dream. But it was so beautiful, she looked at her beloved with all her might. Mendy enveloped her puppet more and more, creating a further illusion. She controlled her experimental subject and she released her power on her former comrades. The explosion killed the former comrades. The guards stared at this picture in surprise. Dolly and Mary looked at the incomprehensible picture and could not understand what was happening there. Mary said that there is no need to waste energy on her. She will activate the insects that are in the Gorgon, and Dolly should kill Aiden. At this time, Carol was rushing with a succubus under her arm in 13. An unknown creature, which was given the name 13, lit up with magical symbols. Mary was blinded. The creature, wrapping its tentacles tightly around her, grabbed Mary, and she felt like she was drowning. The horror of childhood, chaos, fear, the depths of the cursed earth surfaced in her head. They sat her down, trembling with fear, and asked her to stay and wait. The creature said that he brought her here from the depths of the forbidden lands, and her strength was running out. He promised to return tomorrow. A magical barrier would protect the baby. She found herself in some cave, trembling with fear and horror, and screaming to her savior not to leave her. She burst into tears and heard those terrible creatures from the forbidden land calling her little pig. In front of her was a handful of ants and a voice that she was hungry. She ran away, little with the rope still dangling around her neck. She couldn't get back there again. She made her way through the thorns, tearing her legs until they bled. But she could not stay here. She fell on sharp thorns like sharp teeth. This horror came to life in her again. Then she sees a woman in front of her with her face covered. Only her huge, beautiful eyes. The stranger asked her if she was ready to see the world outside the forbidden zone. Dolly talked to a stranger, saying that this child had come such a long way. She found her on a mountain road. The witch wanted to take her as her student. But the stranger said that this child's skills were very far from magic, and besides, they didn't know her. At that moment, Mary stretched out her bloody hand on the floor and called for her mother. The stranger said that even after hitting her head in this state, she continues to call her mother. Mary babbled that no, her mother taught her this when they were kept in a barn with pigs. The girl said that if there is a chance to leave the forbidden zone, she said to call any man she meets dad and any woman mom. This is the only way to survive. It was so painful for the stranger to hear the word mom. She stood with flowers and her heart was breaking with grief. In front of her lay the coffin of the one she loved so much, her dear daughter. On the table with flowers, there was a photograph of a little smiling girl. The woman changed little Mary's clothes and bandaged her wounds, noting that being her student was very difficult. Then she remembered how her mentor scolded her for conducting genetic experiments on a living person, how angry she was, saying that she should do it on herself if she was so brave. The sobbing girl admitted that she was afraid of pain. The woman grabbed her by the collar of her dress. She shamed her adopted daughter for doing such things at her age in front of living people. Mary, sobbing, asked to forgive her. She just wanted to win the competition. She remembered how her mentor ordered to take care of the body of the man whom Mary had killed and to do everything possible to prevent rumors from leaking about this incident. Next was the awarding of the best student. The mentor warmly hugs the girl who won the competition. The other students were happy, and Mary looked and wanted her to be in that girl's place so that her adoptive mother would be proud of her. Wooden arms wrapped around her, the girl asked to hug her. How she yearned for affection and warmth. Hugging the wooden doll and sobbing, Mary asked not to look down on her. She knows that she is just a replacement for her own daughter. She wants to become the best for her. Holding the wooden body tighter, she talked to him, saying that she was an ordinary person. Magic was beyond her. All that was left was body modification. Clinging to the doll to cry and talk it out, the girl said that she wanted to modify hers. Then her mother would not know anything. And then, as an adult, she flies into the depths of forbidden lands, driven away by her adoptive mother. She screamed at her mother, asking herself why her mother cared about others more than her. She accepted that only the apostle saved her from the abyss into which she fell. She flies back to where she once ran. A huge stake pierces her body, and a familiar voice calls her the little pig who has returned. She saw that very creature, a living dead creature similar to a mummy, that nightmare from childhood. She was abandoned again. Abandoned? Now she has nothing to lose. She still sat near the wall. Evans managed to intercept a spear flying at her adoptive mother, asking what her mother was thinking about. Mary wiped away her tears and said that she simply fell into an illusion. But looking at Evans, her daughter and her best friend, all illusions dissipated. Dolly told her to stop treating herself like that. If not for her technique, they would never have been able to get out of here, and the whole prison would have been filled with snot. And she went forward, dragging the bound Galala behind her. One of the mercenaries, pouring liquid on her sword, ordered her squad not to kill the prisoners if they wanted to get money. The attack with crossbows began. The Gorgon fought in the front ranks with the detachment. Behind the Gorgon, Camilla and the succubus were breaking through the enemy, who was still running in her shorts. Suddenly, a bright emerald light appeared from the Gorgon. Her magma power was at its peak. Dolly paused. Mary was next to her, Evans was in front, Galala was lying tied up on the floor. Dolly cast a transformation spell and used a strike against the Gorgon's magic. The succubus screamed for her to get out of the way. They were running away from the monster and not fighting. Dolly used the transformation and said that she couldn't let them ruin everything. A passage opened and she walked forward, dragging the bound elf. The incredibly powerful energy of the descendant of the ancient god Baal appeared before her. Camilla, the succubus, and the others screamed from the sting when they saw what was coming towards them. The witch, changing part of her appearance, called upon the power of the gods, opening the abyss of Akot. She fired a ray at Liesel, who had turned into the god of destruction and was running towards her. She stopped, destroying the barrier in which Dolly wanted to lock her. Once in the labyrinth, she heard the voice of the god of the labyrinth, Akot, with whom she had to play a game if you want to get out. Dolly had to use this technique to stop her from killing everyone. But the witch's strength was also exhausted. She did not know where to get new strength. From the descendant of the ancient god came an even stronger clot of energy, destroying everything. With each spell, its power only increased. The guard shouted that there was a message from the boss, the blockers were removed, the prisoners' forces were working at 100%. At this time, the Gorgon controlled by Mendy was in the created illusion of the first wedding night. Mendy, giggling, asked to get out from under the blanket. The Red Gorgon asked not to rush. Mendy stated that she was a professional in acupuncture massage and would quickly relax her. The Gorgon began to regain strength. It seemed a little more and it would explode. With one blast wave, she laid down dozens of prisoners advancing on her. The vampire said that she was entering the battle and prepared to attack. The Gorgon and the vampire began to fight. Just as she wanted to bite into her former ally, Carol's mercenaries came, telling her not to kill her, otherwise they wouldn't pay. At this time, the intertent rushed in and shouted that even though they were mercenaries, this did not give the right to ignore her orders. Then she saw the senior guard who reassured her by saying that there was only one circle from the very beginning. It simply served to intimidate. She screamed in horror and surprise, but the girl explained that it was just a lot of money being spent on him. Dolly asked Mary how she was going to break through. There were a lot of guards. She suggested using Evans. But the witch said that the girl was needed to kill Aiden, and she couldn't spend the rest of her power anymore. Suddenly, the Reaper of Death appeared in front of them from the magic circle. Mary asked who he was, and Dolly realized that Arsena had begun to act. The Reaper of Death said that at first she did not believe that she could gather many souls here, but at the moment many people had died, and clarified whether they would continue the battle. Dolly replied that she had used up most of her power. In this state, it was dangerous to challenge Aiden, to which the Reaper replied that she didn't care. But when they were at Aiden's office, she would help them. Mary wondered if the prisoners had reached Aiden's office, and Dolly, talking through the Reaper with Arsena, said that her help would not hurt. Starting to release the tentacles from her hand, the Ant Queen thought that if he was at least crippled, it would be good. But she saw a different picture. Veronica destroyed all the zombies created by Mary. The girl from the rest home pulled insects out of her body, swearing that the food was poisoned. Over a card game, they and their friends discussed what would happen if they ate every last crumb. The girl, tightening her corset, wondered if she was really so naive that she wanted to control her with the help of parasites. In front of her sat a werewolf, whom she ordered to return or die. She thought it was really rare to see something like this in a prison run by Aiden. She saw Veronica sitting there, having killed so many crazed prisoners, thinking that she was very concentrated on animal instincts. She would need time to get back to normal. She appeared in front of Veronica, wondering how she retained her sanity. Usually werewolves lose their minds with so many murders. Opening the passage portal, Dolly asked Mary where her daughters were. To kill Aiden, they needed to save their strength. The Ant Queen pointed to the corpses of the girls, saying that there was no one to call, and they were already dead. She used them as reservoirs for the potion. Mary, followed by Evans and Dolly, went through the passage. The vampires screamed where they were going, throwing everyone away. She was turned into a bat. The prisoners were alarmed that their boss was abandoning them to their fate. They saw the mercenaries advancing, realizing that their strength was too small to defeat them.